Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Maestas.
Good morning. Can you all hear me?
Good morning.
Is anybody else on? Good morning, folks. We're having some technical difficulty.
Morning.
Okay, sound check. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, I can hear you just fine.
Okay, great. Thank you. Audio check. Check.
Check.
Sound check. 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 Sound check. Sound check. Check.
Check. There's a lot of echo.
Yeah, are you all hearing a lot of echo?
Yes, I hear a lot of echo.
Sound check. Do you guys still hear a lot of echo?
It's getting better.
It's better?
Yeah, it's okay. It's good.
That's pretty good.
Excellent.
You guys can hear that out there?
All right, everybody, it's 9:30. Good morning. Welcome, everyone, to the weekly New Mexico Public Regulation Commission meeting. My name is Joseph Maestas. I'm coming to you from Bond Wilson Technical Center in the heart of the Central Consolidated School District in Kirtland, New Mexico. And I just want to give a shout out to the Bond Wilson staff here for being so gracious and welcoming us into their great facility. I'd like to call this meeting to order. So Judy, will you be taking the roll call?
Yes, I will. Good morning, Commissioner, and it's nice to see that everyone made it safely up there. So with that, Commissioner Maestas,
Here.
Commissioner Hall,
Here.
Commissioner Fishman, Commissioner Byrd,
Here.
Commissioner Vicente Aguilar.
Here.
There are 4 commissioners present, so we have a quorum.
Thank you, Judy. Let's move on to the next item, the Pledge of Allegiance and the State Pledge. Commissioner Byrd, if you could lead us in both.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I salute the flag of the state of New Mexico and the Zia symbol of perfect friendship among united cultures.
Thank you, Commissioner. Let's move on to consideration and approval of the agenda. I believe we have one item that is going to be removed.
That's correct, Commissioner. I believe it's the Rosa Joint Ventures matter that is
Yes, that's
proposed.
correct. It's 18-214.
18-214. Okay, there's.
I'll bring that back next week.
Are there any other amendments, commissioners, to the agenda in addition to removing the Rosa Joint Ventures in case 18-214? Okay, hearing none, do I hear a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved.
Okay, do I hear a second? We have a motion by Commissioner Byrd.
Second.
Okay, we have a second by Commissioner Hall. Any?
Like the chairman got present.
Yeah, he's frozen at this point. I can Is there any discussion on the motion and the second? If not, I can take the roll call.
I don't believe there was.
Okay. Commissioner Byrd,
Aye.
Commissioner Hall,
Aye.
Commissioner Vicente Aguilar.
Aye.
And I see that Commissioner Maestas has lost connection and is probably trying to reestablish it. But
I'm on if you can see me, and
Yeah.
my vote is aye.
so the motion to approve the agenda as amended passes 4-0.
Great. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Let's move on to the next agenda item, introduction of special guests. Do we have any special guests?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, I am not aware of any special guests, but I will defer to Wayne if he's got anyone he would like to introduce.
Mr. Chair,
Yes. John.
Wayne, if I may. I tried to introduce, I introduced Bamadou Ouattara a week ago, and he was not on. So I'm not going to repeat what I said last week, but other than to welcome Bamadou, and he is on today. His video is on, and Bamadou, if you could unmute and introduce yourself, I would appreciate it very much, and I think the commission would as well. Thank you.
Hello. Yeah. Hello. My name is Bamadou Ouattara. I'm a fourth-year PhD student in economics at the University of New Mexico. I also have a master in economics from UNM. My background is mostly quantitative analysis, and I have a bachelor degree in petroleum engineering. I have a very deep interest in issues of environment and natural resource management. And currently, I'm working on research about petroleum effect on housing prices in the state of New Mexico and Texas. So it's an honor for me to be here today, and I'm very excited about my future at the PRC. Thank you.
Welcome aboard. Any comments, commissioners, on our latest staff acquisition?
Mr.
Welcome.
Chairman.
Yes, Commissioner Vicente Aguilar.
Yes, good morning, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for coming back this week to introduce yourself formally. It's great to hear from you. So welcome. You come to a great organization. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Anyone else that wishes to make any remarks?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Hall.
And I'm coming to the meeting today from San Francisco, where I'm here to participate in a panel discussion on grid matters in the West and transmission and distribution systems. And I simply wanted to say welcome to Bamadou. I also wondered why we didn't hear from him last time, and I'm very glad you came back to speak to us. And I just wanted to welcome you because you're obviously very well educated and qualified and interested in what we do. And I want to just encourage you to stay with us, because this is one of the most interesting, this is probably the most interesting place I've ever had to work. And the work is so vital in carrying out the energy transition and the many other things we have to do, but especially everything we do is influenced by the transition and energy process that we and content that we are living through right now. So people like you are exactly the sort of people we want to have on our staff for a long time. So very, very hearty welcome to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hall. Any other commissioners wish to make any brief remarks? All right. Let's go ahead and move on to
you.
Let's go ahead and move on. We do have a special guest. We've been joined by Representative Allison. He represents District 4. And from what I understand, he has been working very hard to bring additional resources to the Bond Wilson Technical Center. And so without any further delay, I'm going to step aside and allow Representative Allison to say a few words. Mr. Representative, please come over here and make sure you're in the.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am Anthony Allison, and I represent District 4 in the New Mexico House. My district consists of 9 Navajo chapters and 3 communities. The communities of Fruitland, Waterflow, Kirtland, and a section of Northern Farmington. And I want to welcome the PRC to the Four Corners area. So, Mr. Chair, thank you for choosing Bond Wilson as your venue. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative Allison. We appreciate your leadership in the House, and I'm sure your constituents here in the Four Corners area are most appreciative of everything that you've done, and especially for this wonderful technical center that services the Central Consolidated School District, specifically the Kirtland School District in Shiprock. So thank you again for joining us. All right, is there any public comment? Do we have any public comment, Isaac?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we do have a few folks signed up for public comment. It sounds like they should probably be there with you at the Bond Wilson Technical Center. At least that's what they indicated.
Okay, they're not here yet, and if I may, if the commission would indulge me, if when they arrive, maybe we can accommodate them to make public comments here, but there's no one else here yet other than Representative Allison. So if that's okay, let's move on. And if those folks arrive, then we'll have them come up and make some comments. So if there's no objections, let's move on to the next agenda item. That is a presentation from Power and Control Solutions, Inc. on new technology available for capturing CO2 and NOx. And so our rule typically is to keep these presentations to 10 minutes or under. However, we can exceed that if there's keen interest on the part of commissioners, and if they have questions for the presenter, then we can do that, but we'd like to keep these to 10 minutes. So with that, is it Mr. Salazar, are you going to be presenting? And if you don't mind sharing your screen so we can see the slides.
Good morning, sir. It's going to be Chris Abeta, our president and inventor, is going to be giving the presentation.
Okay. Please proceed.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Chris Abeta. I am the inventor and president for Power and Control Solutions. PCS is located here in Farmington, New Mexico. It is an honor and privilege today to present our immediate solution to help the San Juan Generating Station tackle its current NOx emission challenges. PCS's technology is designed to curtail the serious blackout dilemma now facing New Mexico until renewable energy is in its place. In a few short months, PNM will shutter San Juan Generating Station and transfer this asset for $1 to the city of Farmington under the Energy Transition Act while operating under the current NOx emission rates. This is simply unacceptable, not addressing the current NOx emissions before this transfer of this asset. PCS has an immediate enhanced SNCR project to address San Juan Generating Station's ability to operate compliantly under regional haze rules for NOx emissions. NOx emissions historically for the San Juan Generating Station have been difficult to address due to the local coal composition. It's easy to understand why APS Four Corners Power Plant chose to install selective catalytic reduction for the remaining operating units to continue operating compliantly under the NOx regional haze rule for operation until 2031. PCS and its co-developing partners can achieve 70 to 80% NOx removal with our enhanced selective non-catalytic reduction technology. Because PCS has this technology in hand, New Mexico and neighboring states must be assured that the San Juan Generating Station is moving forward to be NOx compliant prior to this ask being transferred for a $1 under the Energy Transition Act. Your favorable consideration will have a long-lasting and positive impact for everyone now and generations to come. In PCS Drawing 1, it shows our patented injection technology optimizing urea and hydrogen peroxide delivered with steam for achieving the smallest particle size possible and to achieve the highest possible flue gas interface. With this combination of injection and hydrogen peroxide, the enhanced process and continued reaction nearly mitigates ammonia slip and has the potential for a 70 to 80% NOx reduction. PCS's patent technology has the highest achievable, best available retrofit technology for selective non-catalytic reduction for NOx removal that is possible today. Due diligence by our co-developing partners resulted in chemical kinetic modeling from over 50 different models for SNCR. And now only empirical validation is required to understand the final NOx reduction possible under real operating conditions. The PCS injectors, the design utilizes proven and reliable retrofitted soot blowers that the plant is already familiar with, thus allowing for seamless operation and maintenance for the required forecasted years of the San Juan Generating Station to 2037. PCS Drawing 2 shows the distribution of both urea and hydrogen peroxide in their temporary storage to start validation of empirical NOx removal rates under partial and full load conditions for Unit 1 and Unit 4, the San Juan Generating Station. After the removal rate validation is completed, permanent reagent storage and distribution can be determined. During the validation cycle, APS Four Corners should be able to supply the required urea for a fair fee. PCS estimates that the total budgetary cost for validation to permanent installation is $30 million and estimates the project duration to be 1 year from cradle to grave. San Juan Generating Station Units 1 and 4 is currently operating with excessive tons of NOx every day, and P&M is currently paying fees for their excessive emissions for NOx. Continued operation under these current conditions going forward under the Energy Transition Act, simply put, is not acceptable for air quality standards now or for generations to come. The questions that needs to be answered for the community are: 1, what is the quantity of excessive emissions of NOx currently being emitted at San Juan Generating Station? And 2, how much are the excessive emission fees for NOx that P&M is currently paying? 3, what will the NOx emission rates be under the Energy Transition Act moving forward? PCS would now like to summarize our NOx removal technology and finish today's 10-minute presentation on CO2 capture. First, PCS would like to take a moment to brief everyone on our most current initiative. We have formally requested from the New Mexico Small Business Assistance Program funding for technical assistance from Los Alamos National Labs capture experts to perform tabletop validations for PCS's NOx and CO2 capture removal technologies. We have suggested that LANL use the San Juan Generating Station as a model for our technologies because of the generating station first being located here in New Mexico. Second, that the generating station's current emissions operational status before the Transition Act and during the transition, and PCS's local expertise of several projects that we have performed at PCS and is very familiar with the site. PCS looks forward to and would very much appreciate an invitation back from the PRC in the very near future to discuss our projects on NOx removal and CO2 captures with Los Alamos National Labs evaluating them. We are certain that this path is the right path for New Mexico, and it is the best interest of the public, of workers, and most importantly, the environment for generations to come. With everyone's support, PCS can pave the way for a better, cleaner, and more environmental friendly operation at the San Juan Generating Station for as long as necessary to secure the needed power in our state and mitigate unnecessary blackouts now and potentially in the future. We understand and support the need for significant changes regarding our power system infrastructure and the need for reliable energy. However, despite how badly our state needs funding to support its power foundation on renewable energy sources, we can't lose focus on the importance of doing the right thing and doing it the right way for everyone, and more importantly, our environment. A solution for this transition is to enable the San Juan Generating Station to remain in service, to bridge the gap, but it needs to be done in an environmentally compliant and friendly way. And PCS is ready, willing, and able to help you meet the power goals of New Mexico and mitigate blackouts as the first priority. Let's get this done together. I look forward to a more detailed discussion in the near future. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Mr. Abeyta.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner.
Any questions for Mr. Abeyta? Any questions at all?
You sound so godly.
Yeah, we're getting a lot of feedback from some speakers here. I hope it's not too bad on your end.
We can hear you fine. It just sounds funny.
Okay. Anything else? All right, let's go ahead and move on to the next agenda item. Can you display? Thank you, Isaac. All right, so let's move on to discussion and potential action, presentation of the fiscal year 23 operating budget. And I don't know, Wayne, are you going to kick this off and then hand it over to Renata?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. Nice to see you all this morning. I think we can make this fairly brief. We are bringing to you for your consideration and approval our FY23 operating budget. That is a budget that will take effect on July 1st of this year for fiscal year 23. It's also the operating budget that has been approved as part of the legislative process in House Bill 2 and signed by the governor. As you know, Mr. Chairman, and the commission knows, we worked very hard during this past legislative session, both to shore up our budget for the current fiscal year, FY22, but also to put the commission in a better place for going forward with our FY23 budget, operating budget. Overall, the FY23 operating budget is about a 9% increase over the current fiscal year. In addition to that increase, Mr. Chairman, as you know, we were also able to secure authority to use up to $500,000 in fees under the Community Solar Act to administer that program. And we were also able, Mr. Chairman, to receive additional budget adjustment request authority, program transfer authority of up to $250,000 for FY23. We think, Mr. Chairman, that puts us in a good place going into the new fiscal year. I've always looked at this as a 2-year process. We probably didn't get everything we asked for in the first year, but there'll be another budget cycle coming along. Our FY24 budget is due on September 1st. This all happens very quickly this time of the year. So we have given the commission the actual operating budget that we're required to submit to DFA by Monday. We can pull that up on the screen and Renata can go through it in any detail that you want to, Mr. Chairman. But again, this is the operating budget that's been authorized and approved by the legislature for FY23, and we are happy to answer any questions or go into any level of detail that you would like us to, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Wayne. Is there a desire on the part of commissioners to have a brief presentation of this? I mean, it's in your packet. I assume you've all looked at it. What's the wishes of the commission? Would you want a brief run through of the budget, or are we prepared to approve it?
I'm ready.
Mr. Chairman, I'd
Commissioner
like to make
Vicente
a
Aguilar.
motion. Yes, I made a motion, Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Mr. Chairman, I made a motion to approve the FY budget that was just discussed. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Vicente Aguilar. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Was that second by Commissioner Byrd? Any discussion on the motion? Judy, roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Maestas,
Aye.
Commissioner Hall,
Aye.
Commissioner Vicente Aguilar,
Aye.
Commissioner Byrd.
Aye.
The motion passes 4-0.
Judy?
And has Commissioner Fishman joined us?
Yes, I have. So I'm going to vote aye.
Okay, then correction is that the motion to approve the budget has been approved 5-0.
Great, thank you.
Mr.
And I
Chairman.
just want to commend Wayne and Renata for all your work in putting this budget together. I realize, as Wayne said, we didn't get everything, but I think the important thing is we're finally getting the attention of the state legislature in having them understand all the legislative mandates that we have to implement, and they're hearing us and they're acting on it by increasing our budget. Hopefully, this is a positive trend in the succeeding legislative session. So great job, Wayne and Renata. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let's go ahead and move on to
Mr.
consent
Chair,
action
I'm sorry.
items.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Mr. Chair. It appears that a couple of the folks who had signed up to make public comment are now connected to the Zoom connection, and so it looks like Mr. Joseph Hernandez is
Do
connected.
we have some public commenters on the Zoom call?
It appears that way, yes. So I just wanted to alert you to that in case you wanted to go back to the public comment section.
Isaac?
Mr. Chair, can you hear me?
Isaac, are you there?
Mr. Chair, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yeah, and I can hear Isaac, but apparently you can't. He has a couple of more public commenters on Zoom he would like to allow, if you are okay with that.
Yes, yeah, let's go ahead and proceed. I don't know who they are. If they could just state their name, and they have 3 minutes. So we have is our first commenter, Joseph Hernandez.
Good morning, Mr. Chair.
Good morning, Joseph.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the PRC. My name is Joseph Hernandez, and I am from Shiprock, New Mexico. I work for, I am the Danette Energy Organizer for NAVA Education Project, and I work on energy issues here in the Four Corners region, and on specifically on the Navajo Nation with the chapters on education, and I've been doing a lot of outreach on the energy side, on the issues that we're facing up here. And I first want to thank the PRC for coming up here and visiting the communities, and especially being there at Bond Wilson Tech Center. I want to also preference that, you know, I understood that the PRC visited the power plants, and I think that's good to understand, you know, what this transition means for the community. It's important that, you know, that we have a just transition, you know, to a clean energy economy, especially for the workers there. You know, we got to ensure that there's equity with this energy transition, and that our communities, you know, the tribal communities here, where there's a lot of workers that we're not left behind, and there are clean energy jobs that are coming into the community, such as the large solar project that's just northwest of San Juan Dredging Station, and that will create, you know, over I want to say over 600 jobs, but there's real potential, and especially investing into the clean energy economy. Where you're at, Bond Wilson Tech Center, you know, they could definitely play a pivotal role in that energy transition. And they have a unique partnership with Navajo Technical University. Navajo Tech has a renewable energy program in Crown Point called the Energy Systems Program. And this is a great moment to, you know, to like increase the Navajo workforce, you know, because they're training students about photovoltaic and wind energy systems. So, and again, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee, I've been working in these communities, talking about energy transition, and the communities here are ready. They're ready to take this on and to move forward, you know, away from, you know, the fossil fuel economy. Thank you very much, and again, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Hernandez. I appreciate that. And thank you for your work in the community and your advocacy supporting the Energy Transition Act. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the next commenter. I understand we have Wendy Atsidi. Wendy, are you there?
Hello, I'm here.
Welcome.
Thank you. And thank you everyone that is on online and there. So I would like to thank the commission for having some time and sharing some comments. And just as Joseph have shared, I am a Danette Energy Organizer. My name is Wendy Atsidi, and I work with NAVA EP. And so as Joseph have shared, in echoing a few of his statements there, is that we are in this new transition where a lot of the tribal communities are very open to hearing everything that is channeling down through this new energy sector, and in areas of supporting the Energy Transition Act and the way that it is going to be helping communities in transition that have been impacted from such closures. And it's very relevant to keep to keep that communication strong with our communities that are within that region of the impacted area of such transition. And so I just want to share that I am thankful for just seeing some more updates to things that are happening, and again, thank you for your time. So yeah.
Thank you, Wendy, and thank you for everything you do on behalf of your community. I believe we have a third commenter, a Mr. Mario Atencio. Mr. Atencio, are you on? Isaac, is Mr. Atencio on?
Mr. Chair, I do not see that he is connected at the moment, no. And those are the only three commenters I am aware of who are signed up.
Okay, I may have to keep my video off. So let's go ahead and proceed. Let's move back on to the agenda. We have the consent agenda. Before we have a reading of the case numbers and captions, do I hear a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Hall. Do I hear a second?
Second.
I'll second that. All right, so Judy or Russell, will you please read the cases and the captions?
Yes, I need to have a lot of different screens here. Okay. Well, all right, we'll try to do it off of this. Hold on. 22-00-062 in the matter of the application of Springer Volunteer Ambulance Service for reissuance of certificate number 49329 to provide ambulance service. Utility matter 20-00099 in the matter of the application for broadband support from the State Rural Universal Service Fund as per 17.11.10 point. I'm having trouble reading that number. Potential order regarding Kit Carson Electric Cooperative Inc.'s notice of commencement of project and request for initial disbursement. 22-00093 UT, application for approval of El Paso Electric Company's 2022 renewable energy plan pursuant to the Renewable Energy Act Rule 17.9.572 and 6 revised rate number 38 RPS cost rider. Potential order regarding verified motion for 3-month extension of May 1st filing date. And 22-00097 UT in the matter of the applications for 2023 broadband program support from the State Rural Universal Service Fund as per 17.11.10-31 NMAC. Potential order opening docket and setting deadline for filing of applications. And those are all the matters on the consent agenda.
Thank you, Judy.
Shall I take a roll call vote?
Yeah, any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, roll call vote.
Commissioner Fishman,
Aye.
Commissioner Hall,
Aye.
Commissioner Vicente Aguilar,
Aye.
Commissioner Byrd,
Aye.
Commissioner Maestas.
Aye.
The consent agenda items pass 5-0.
All right, let's go ahead and move on to regular action items. We have no regular action items under transportation, so let's move on to utility matters in the case of 21-200-UT. In the matter of Southwestern Public Service Company's application to amend its certificates of public convenience and necessity to convert Harrington Generation Station from coal to natural gas, and for authorization to accrue allowance for funds used in construction and for other associated relief. We have a potential order. So Judy, how do you want to proceed? Will Robert Lennon kick this off, or will you?
Yes, I would like Robert Lennon to
You're on
present.
mute, Judy.
That's interesting.
No, Judy, you're not.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, you can't hear her apparently.
I would like Mr. Lennon to proceed, and then I can go through the exceptions and the proposed order.
Okay.
Good
Please
morning.
proceed. Good morning.
Good morning, Chairman Mastis and Commissioners. For those that don't know, my name is Robert Lennon. I am a hearing examiner here at the PRC. I was assigned to hear this case, and I did so. It was a 3-day hearing with about 8 witnesses and very substantial evidence. I am trying to get my screen sharing happening. Can anyone see my summary, my shared screen?
Yes, sir. Looks like it.
Okay, well, thank you, Commissioner Byrd.
It's very, very small text though, sir.
No kidding. Okay, well, I will try to make it larger if possible, because I know I'll try to make it larger so you can read along with me in case I don't speak clearly. You say it's small, right?
Yeah,
Yes,
and
sir.
it's also cutting off on the right side. It's
Okay, well, thank you. Sometimes I do struggle with the technology. I'll try to make it 200%. How does that look?
Can you do full screen? It's like you're only showing, we see your whole computer screen, but your summary is in the right section of it.
Thank you. I apologize for the difficulty. You know, I tried to be prepared for this and had it set up before we started, and then let me try something different, if you would bear with me for
There
one.
you go.
yeah, that
Oh,
looks
you
much
like
better.
that?
Yeah, that's better. We had
Okay.
an SPP meeting
Can
on
everybody see
Monday.
that?
Yes. And it
perfecto.
was like the first time we used it then too.
Once again, I apologize. I will be looking this direction, not at my camera, because my PDF is on my other screen. Actually, it's my Word document is on the other screen. So I apologize for not looking at the camera. So in this case, I prepared within my RD, just what it says, a summary of the case for presentation at this open meeting. And I will read down that summary into the record today. This case is a CCN case. A CCN case is a certificate of convenience and necessity, typically used for new buildings or infrastructure for power plants and such. SPS, which is I want to make sure I say it right. Southwestern Public Service Company, seeks approval to convert its Harrington power plant to use natural gas instead of coal for fuel. The plant provides power to both Texas and New Mexico in a ratio of 2/3 to 1/3 respectively, 1/3 to New Mexico. The plant consists of 3 turbines referred to as units. The plant was designed to use either coal or gas as fuel. The plant currently burns only coal. To use gas, a supply pipeline is necessary to bring the gas to the plants. SPS SPS's request for approval to build the gas supply pipeline to operate on gas rather than coal is the subject of this case. In other words, they're asking for approval to build this pipeline. The estimated cost for the conversion, which includes conversion at the plant, is between 65 and $75 million. I could go into more detail, but I don't need to, so I'll continue unless there's questions. The majority of the expense for the conversion will be incurred to build the pipeline to supply fuel for the plant. It is helpful to clearly state that this is only a CCN case, not a rate case, not an abandonment case. As a CCN case, the Public Utility Act at section 62-9-6 controls. The statutory issue is whether the proposed modification satisfies a public convenience and necessity standard. The standard requires demonstration of a net public benefit. Further, SPS must demonstrate that the modification is the most cost-effective among feasible alternatives. SPS has presented evidence of the cost of the feasible alternatives sustaining this burden. There were 3 interveners which elected to not actively participate in the case. They did not present direct testimony or other evidence opposing SPS's request. PRC staff also does not oppose SPS's request for approval, but does suggest a few reporting type conditions. The 3-day hearing was consumed not only by SPS's presentation, but also by Sierra Club's opposition. Substantial financial analysis and much testimony was presented regarding computer modeling. The parties agreed to allow Sierra Club to present substantially different modeling results as errata just prior to the hearing. SPS testimony in response to the substantially altered testimony and position of the Sierra Club witness was received. The Sierra Club witness had first testified that modeling indicated that none of the 3 units should be converted from coal to gas, but she later admitted modeling errors and opined, in contrast, that 2 of the units should be converted from coal to gas and that only 1 of the units should be retired from service. So the issue in this case had been narrowed. The narrowed issue was whether to convert all 3 or just 2 of the units from coal to gas. There was no dispute that gas is a cleaner fuel than coal. Evidence revealed that the vast majority of the conversion expense is to build the supply pipeline, and that there are only minor modifications necessary for the 3 units because they were designed to burn either fuel. Evidence revealed that the difference in costs between the 2 options, 2 or 3 units, over the next 20 years, reduced to net present value, was only $5 million over the next 20 years of operation. Sorry for the redundancy. And then I gave the figures. The actual net present value of the revenue requirement over the next 20 years, and this is using statistical analysis using modeling with computers. Here's where the 2 figures for the 2 options to be decided. One was $11,949,000,000, and the other option was $11,944,000,000 over the 20 years. This $5 million difference was characterized as statistically insignificant and within the statistical margin of error of the financial analysis. So there was no persuasive evidence of any significant difference in cost between conversion of 2 units or conversion of 3 units. SPS's position is that all 3 units should be converted because not only is the cost of the supply pipeline, not only is the cost of the supply pipeline essentially the same for 2 or 3 units, the 3rd unit will provide continued capacity and continued capacity, and increased reliability to the public, even if it's only operated during times of peak need. Sierra Club's position is generally to oppose an extension of approval for the use of fossil fuels like gas. Sierra Club relies upon a strict reading of the net benefits test that the option to not convert and retire one of the 3 units would cost $5 million less than converting all 3. And upon such a strict application, conversion of only 2 units should be approved, with retirement of the 3rd unit. Commission staff and SPS contend that the Sierra Club position is flawed, as it is driven only by theoretical economic modeling considerations without regard to actual real-life circumstances. That while the public convenience and necessity standard implies a net public benefit, and SPS must show the change is most cost-effective among feasible alternatives, one cannot ignore reality. The reality is that there is no statistically significant financial difference between the cost of the 2 alternatives, converting 2 or converting 3 units from coal to gas. There being no significant difference in cost, other practical qualitative criteria must be considered.
Mr. Chair.
Pardon?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Commissioner Hall.
I have a question.
Yes,
Go ahead.
ma'am.
Mr. Lennon, you stated earlier that this $5 million difference was characterized as not being statistically significant. Who characterized it that way?
Well, number one, I interpreted it that way by looking at the data which were presented by Mr. Elsey was the witness, and he presented SPS's analysis of the results of the computer modeling, which was, much of the testimony, cross-examination concerned that computer modeling and the reliability of it.
Okay, you said number 1. Is there a number 2?
I'm sorry.
Or is that the only reason? That's the only answer, right? It was your characterization as statistically insignificant, correct?
The words are my words insignificant. Okay. My job is to assess the evidence presented to me. The evidence presented to me by the witness.
I understand. Okay, I understand. And I understand. I read the exceptions and the response to exceptions, and I guess I am a little concerned that you would characterize the difference in such a way as to kind of create a mental equivalence when there is a $5 million difference, which may or may not, maybe it's statistically insignificant, but it, in a real world, $5 million is $5 million. Anyhow, I would like to go on. That's all right. I'll let you go on. I'm sorry to make an interruption, but I think it's important for us to understand that that was your characterization and not the witnesses who said there was a minor difference, but they didn't take the liberty of saying that they're statistically insignificant in such a way as to make it seem like they're equivalent.
Well, thank you, Commissioner. If I could clarify perhaps just a little bit more. When the witness presents financial figures showing only a $5 million difference when we're dealing with $12 billion.
Correct. I understand what you're getting at.
That's a very significant, it's a very insignificant difference. And it's pretty obvious. I actually, just let me look at my notes for a second. I actually did a ratio, and it comes out to something like.
Yeah, I know. It's small. It's 3 orders of magnitude or something.
5.
But my point is, when you're saying something is characterized, and you were the one who characterized it, I just think you should say so.
Okay, well, thank you, Commissioner. If I may continue.
Please do.
Mr. Chair, I
Yes, Commissioner
question.
Fishman.
Yeah, thank you. So how sensitive is this analysis to changes in fuel costs, which have been pretty volatile lately, at least in gas?
Yeah, that's very interesting. And, you know, like I said, it was a 3-day hearing with experts testifying. And the hearing got into the nitty gritty, if you will, of the variables that were put into the computer modeling. I found, and it is, you know, like I said, it's my job. I found that the SPS data was more reliable, frankly, than the Sierra Club data and their analysis and their inputs. SPS data did include, the variables did include various levels of cost for fuel, including cost for gas. There was a conservative estimate, a less conservative estimate, a most likely estimate. So there were many of these types of variables were put into the computer modeling. And keep in mind that the computer modeling extends projections over 20 years.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's only computer modeling. And the variables are only projected variables over the next 20 years. There was testimony from about real life considerations, and I was about to get to that. And the real life considerations are keeping the lights on, as I believe Commissioner Maestas said in one of his public releases. So the issue is keeping the lights on in times of peak need. This one of the 3 units would be typically or projected to be used only in peak times. And the real life testimony, or excuse me, the testimony about real life considerations when the computer modeling is so close, I found convincing. I found substantial. I found it was, these are people that work in the field daily and for many years, as compared, frankly, to the expert witness hired by Sierra Club. With all respect, Miss Glick, Debbie Glick was her name. She had, frankly, admitted on cross-examination that she never actually worked in the field, and there was quite a bit of cross-examination. Her testimony was changed at the last minute. Her computer modeling was changed at the last minute. Her testimony was less than convincing compared to the SPS testimony. And the SPS testimony I found credible, and the credible evidence showed only a 5/1000ths of a difference between the 2 options as it had been narrowed. A 5/1000ths difference is frankly no difference. When they have no difference, I'm going to look at the real life, if you will, projections of the real life people in the field as perhaps somewhat more, having more weight. And that's how, sure.
One other question following that. So I understand what you're saying there. And how much of this power serves the Western grid? Because SPS is on the, they're a member of a RTO.
I don't recall that being any evidence. I don't, it just wasn't entered into evidence. There was quite a bit of discussion about the margins that are required to participate in the grid, and they needed I believe the testimony was a 12% margin, and operation of all 3 units rather than 2 would help to achieve that 12% margin. That was in the testimony. So there was testimony about the grid, but not about that specific issue.
Okay. So they need a 12% margin to qualify as a participant.
Exactly.
In their RTO. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll continue. Interestingly, evidence was presented that operating on gas for the remainder of the expected expected life of the plant is consistent with New Mexico's movement to renewable resources, and the life of the plant is within New Mexico's time limit, 2045, while Sierra Club's general position remains that approval of the conversion to a different fossil fuel, albeit a cleaner cleaner than coal, should not be extended. There is an alternative and valid perspective in the evidence consistent with the Sierra Club position that the continuing full capacity provided by all 3 units, not just 2 units, allows for more reliable power for consumers during peak demand. So converting from coal for all 3 units with continuing reliability actually supports the gradual transition to renewables. That's a little bit more vague than I would have liked to have stated, but I'm going to, if there was any questions about that, I could illuminate further, but I'd rather just stick to what I wrote in the summary. Next paragraph. The evidence supports an approval of SPS's request for modification of the CCNs for all 3 units, allowing construction of the gas pipeline and the conversion from coal to gas. Uncontested, the record also supports approval of the estimated cost of construction and the accrual of AFUDC, allowances for funds used during construction pursuant to Rule 580, and the reporting type regulatory conditions as suggested by PRC staff. And before I get off on any questions you might have, I don't want to forget this. Let me mention, I detected an error in my RD I want to bring to your attention. It's on page 15, I think. Pardon me. There it is. There are typographical errors. They're not substantive. And this error is also not substantive if it's read within context to the rest. But it bothered me because it states exactly the opposite of what it should. In that paragraph where you see I have yellow highlighted, I believe that no word wasn't in the PDF which was submitted to records. I went back and looked at my Word doc and it was there. So I don't know how the no was excluded, but it changes, completely flips this sentence. So I want to make it clear that on page 14, what I said was there being no persuasive evidence in opposition thereto. Basically, there was no opposition. The commission should also approve the request for certified estimated cost of construction and authorize the accrual of allowance for funds used during construction. Basically, this case was about 2 versus 3 in the conversion. There was really nothing no evidence in opposition to the application concerning AFUDC and certifying the estimated cost. So I want to make it clear that although it wasn't in the PDF and I don't know how it was changed, the sentence should have a no in there. And it's significant, it's not so significant when you read it in context of the entire order. It's obviously missing 2 letters, but that no word didn't make it to the order either, which is on page 5 of the order. And I've just stated for the record what the correction should be. And I would ask that the record reflect that there should be a no between the words there being no evidence on page 5 of the order, about in the center of the page where the suggested order says the recommended decision found, and it apparently quoted even my error, or I'll take responsibility for it. I really don't know how it happened, but it is included in the order. It transferred over the order. So anyhow.
Mr. Chair.
Yes,
Commissioner.
I want to make sure I'm on the same pages that Mr. Lennon is referring to on page 14 of the recommended decision in that paragraph. I have in my copy, it says there being no persuasive evidence in opposition thereto.
Well,
so it shows up in mine and also on page 5. It says in paragraph 12, about 6 lines up, there being no persuasive evidence in opposition thereto, the commission should also approve the the request for the certified estimated cost of construction. Is that the right sentence, the one where it talks about estimated cost of construction?
Absolutely. And I apologize if I've confused anyone or
Yeah, maybe.
confused anything.
It shows up here anyhow.
Well, then the correction, it made it through. So I apologize for all that confusion. Frankly, if that's the version you have, you can completely disregard everything I've said after reading the executive summary into the record. And thank you for the smile, Commissioner Fishman. That's very welcome from this end. And thank you, Ms. Hall, Commissioner Hall, for clarifying that. I appreciate it.
No problem.
Any questions? I'm open for questions.
Any questions for Mr. Lennon?
Mr. Chair, I do have a question. I was wondering too, and I think you just discussed it as kind of vague, but I was noticing in the SPS response to Sierra Club's exceptions, they do say, and it's just a sentence, it says, well, it's two sentences. Contrary to the Sierra Club's perspective, natural gas and renewable generation are not mutually exclusive. Conversion of all 3 units to natural gas operations today facilitates the addition of renewable sources in the future. And I don't have an opinion about that one way or another. I just wondered, what was the testimony on that? I was just wondering what's the basis for that statement.
Commissioner
Is there
Hall,
testimony on that?
thank you for the question, Commissioner Hall. And could you tell me where that language
Yes.
is? I'd like to look.
That's on page 20 at the bottom of the page.
So if you would,
in the recommended decision. Wait a minute. No. In the exception, in the SPS responses to Sierra Club's exceptions.
okay, I'm going to have to get that before me, if you will.
Yeah.
Sorry. This file is substantial.
Yeah.
So is the testimony.
I mean, to the extent they've got a plan or something that would give rise to that statement, I'd be interested to know what it is. It would make me feel a little bit better about deciding.
You know, I do have their response, but I just frankly can't put my finger on it this moment. Just give me 1 second. You know, I apologize. I don't want to hold anybody up. Could you read it once again, Ms. Hall? I'll try.
Sure. I'm happy to. Wait a minute. Okay, wait a second. Now I gotta change her.
You know, us lawyers, we only like to read things in context, not a sentence pulled out, but
I get it.
my best.
Okay, let's see. Oh, wait, page 20. All right. Let's see, the paragraph they're talking about criticizes Sierra Club's exceptions about making statements about public health impacts. Says there's no record evidence, touts the benefit of renewable. Mentions that Sierra Club touts the benefits of renewable energy resources and asserts that those benefits outweigh any marginal difference in reliability between the natural gas units compared to renewable sources. But they say, setting aside that the Sierra Club can't quantify that, issue having to do with reliability, the record evidence shows conversion of all 3 units enhances SPS's ability to locate renewable generation at Harrington in the future. And there's a footnote 95. Which refers to the transcript. I'm sure you don't want to look that up right now, but that might be where we ought to go. Anyhow, and then it says, contrary to the Sierra Club's perspective, natural gas and renewable generation are not mutually exclusive. Conversion of all 3 units to natural gas operations today facilitates the addition of renewable.
That's exactly right,
Do
Commissioner
you
Hall.
remember that testimony? There apparently was some testimony. I don't know whose it is. It doesn't say.
I don't remember it offhand, but frankly, I found I take this stuff home sometimes. So it was the response to the exceptions was in my briefcase. So I have it in front of me, and yeah, there was a testimony that converting all 3 rather than just 2, which is really no difference in cost, allows peak generating, for example, and that could be important in a time of a high load, and it also allows renewable resources to be used, because renewables, I'm going to speak just generally, and the testimony was that basically the sun doesn't shine at night, obviously. So, you need some generation at night. And obviously, if the wind's not blowing, the wind turbines are not spinning. And those type of renewables, for example, are supported during the transition period. We're talking like 20 years here. If the power plant has 3 rather than 2 turbines available if needed in, say, an unusual weather event, for example. And that was how it was presented.
I see. Okay, thank you. Just curious.
Yes, Commissioner
Fishman, go right ahead. You're on mute.
Unmute here. There we go. Commissioner, may I ask this? If you weren't there to tell me to unmute, I don't know what I would do. Thank you. Robert, how many megawatts is the project? I've been indisposed, so I didn't get a chance to read through all the details on this. So forgive me if I'm asking a couple.
I believe it's 1,050 megawatts for the 3 units, and it would be, my number might be off a little bit, but 355 rings in my brain, less if only 2 rather than 3 units were converted. And like I said, this case narrowed down to whether 2 or 3, and they would lose 355, I remember, but it's 1,050 megawatts for all 3.
Okay. So from an alternative, for instance, to provide this extra peak capacity, one alternative might be battery storage. Did anyone testify to the cost of providing that much battery storage compared to the cost of taking this route, which you're characterizing basically as a kind of a net zero? Was there any testimony on that at all?
Commissioner Fishman, thank you for the question. The testimony went over 3 days, and I have reviewed it, of course, and I do not recall any testimony at all specifically dealing with batteries.
Okay. But it would be fair to say that the battery storage would be fairly expensive. I don't know if you got any testimony to that, but certainly that's my take on it. And the question kind of becomes, well, is that all that extra cost? Is it worth it if we were to put it in place instead of this conversion? And I guess something that's occurring to me, and again, tell me if there's any testimony on this, is converting this from coal to gas compared to building new capacity is pretty darn cheap. when you're considering that we're talking about over 1,000 megawatts for the whole project and $65 million, boy, to build 1,000 megawatts of capacity would be a generally much more expensive than that. Is that a correct way of looking at this?
Well, actually, it is, Commissioner Fishman. You've nailed it essentially. All they need to build basically is a pipeline. It's complicated because they have to buy land rights and things like that. But it's a long pipeline for the natural gas. And like I said, the evidence is that the plant was designed to burn either fuel. So there's minimal changes at the plant. None of this stuff none of these important concepts was contested. Contesting this 3 days of testimony was about whether, until Sierra Club changed its position and testimony immediately before the hearing, the issue was whether to convert at all. And then when they changed their position immediately prior to the hearing, the issue became whether to convert 2 or to convert all 3. It's a 20-inch pipeline that they're building. The 20-inch pipeline can serve either 3 or 2. There's no difference. If they're going to convert 2, which wasn't in dispute by that point, it's the same 20-inch pipeline to convert 2 or to convert 3.
Okay. So there's one final question here. So I do get a little confused when I look at the SPS loads and resources table from their IRP and elsewhere in other filings. And they show themselves in that IRP currently with essentially a gigawatt of excess capacity, 1,000 megawatts. And I know that as part of being part of an RTO, they're probably looking at a bigger perspective. But my question is, why they're saying they need this to meet their 12% excess capacity. Yet if I look at their loads and resource table, from these other cases, they're swimming in excess capacity. So what am I missing here? And was that in any way made clear during your testimony or during your hearings? Excuse me.
Thank you, Commissioner Fishman. As you know, I am bound to decide or to recommend a decision only based on the evidence presented by the parties. So what you're describing wasn't in the evidence. There wasn't reference to the IRP. There wasn't effective cross-examination by Sierra Club as the one moving party, if you will. There was no effective cross-examination concerning any type of inconsistencies regarding the IRP versus the need for the excess capacity to be in the grid. So that's something that if it were to be brought up or had been brought up, would probably have been brought up in cross-examination of SPS witnesses. And the evidence does not include any cross-examination about the IRP.
And I need one more follow-up on that is, was there any, during the testimony and discussion, was there any discussion of the fact that there's a broad problem with the conversion over to renewables and various other factors, that there's closing down coal plants and such, that we've gone from a kind of a glut in power availability and peak availability to being in danger of being short on a mega scale, not just at each utility, but grid wide. Was there much discussion of that and how this project might fit into addressing that situation?
Thank you, Commissioner Fishman. Another good question. But the first thing I said in my summary, which I read, is this is a CCN case. Period. The important thing is this is only a CCN case. This is requesting approval, actually not to build, but to modify the plant, to modify it by building a pipeline. The case is about a pipeline, approval for the pipeline. The the Sierra Club presentation might have included that type of evidence, but it wasn't.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to ask a question.
And I have an answer.
Hold on a second. Judy, do you want to respond to that?
Well, no, I know that Commissioner Hall asked about testimony in the record, and I found what they were citing to, and I just wanted to, if she still has that question, I can read it to her. It was regarding.
Well, one second, Judy. I would, but I don't want to forget what I'm about to ask, and it's just really brief. And it was a follow up. Judy will remember it, and I might forget. So Commissioner Fishman was just asking about information that wasn't part of this record, but it related to the loads and resource table in a different case. And I wanted to ask General Counsel's office, and Judy's maybe right here, but whoever's the appropriate attorney for that case. Is it possible for us to be able to, in making a decision here, if we wanted to, take judicial notice of evidence in other cases that have come before us? Can't we do that, Judy?
I think that would deprive the parties of a due process rights to either object or cross-examine witnesses on what that other testimony was. And what testimony are you actually referring to?
Well, Steve was the one who, and maybe he can't point to testimony, maybe it's just something in his general knowledge pertaining to a load and resource table information that he saw pertaining to this company, I believe, which made him think that they had more than adequate capacity. And I'd have to defer to Commissioner Fishman what document it was he was recalling.
Well, so Commissioner Hall, to clarify, I see kind of two issues going on here. And SPS being a member of an RTO kind of adds another dimension to this, in my mind at least, which is that during the rate case, they had submitted information on a IRP, not an IRP, on a loads and resources. And we're very open about saying we have all this excess capacity. And when I'm asking the questions, and I know this is not a rate case, but just kind of looking forward to when there is a rate case, is that if there's tons of excess capacity that's out there, I know that in their formulas, they charge certain customer classes a lot more, a much higher percentage of fixed assets than others, based on the idea that it's needed for peak. Well, if you've got a gigawatt of excess capacity, I don't know if you should be applying those formulas because it's capacity you didn't need in the first place. So how can you start ascribing an extra charge to somebody who didn't need it? But if their capacity serves the RTO and system capacity, we don't want to shut it down, right? We want to keep the grid going up. We just want to be sure that the costs are allocated appropriately. So I'm just kind of sending a little bit of a warning shot out here to say that, all right, if we need this for system-wide capacity, even if it's at an RTO level, I don't want to put the grid at risk, and I understand that. But let's just be sure we're fair on how we allocate those costs between the customers, because we're aware of all the dynamics. And, there is going to be a rate case filed theoretically later this year by SPS. And, let's just have this issue in mind as we go forward. So that's really what I'm driving at here. And I'm not really driving at saying no to this project. It's really more just being sure that once we say yes to it, we're clear about who's benefiting and who's getting charged. So
I see. Your point is that the 12%, actually, I believe it does say in something I just read, I think it was the RD, or it could have been an exception, that the 12% isn't the company-wide reliability requirement, it's the RTO wide reliability requirement.
That's
Yeah,
correct.
Yeah.
Back to my previous, you were asking Commissioner Hall about SPS's statement setting aside that the Sierra Club is unable to quantify or point to any record evidence that addresses the differences in reliability. The record evidence shows conversion of all three units enhances SPS's ability to locate renewable generation at Harrington in the future. Contrary to the Sierra Club's perspective, natural gas and renewable generation are not mutually exclusive. Conversion of all three units to natural gas operations today facilitates the addition of renewable resources in the future. And I found they cited to different places in the transcript, and I found those two, and there's on page, one was on page 68 and one started on page 135. And I'm reading, there was a question, now does keeping all three units online preclude at all the adding of renewables to the system at Harrington or otherwise at a later date? Answer, it does not. As a matter of fact, I think it actually enhances the ability, because when you do a study and you replace something, you replace it in the models that SPP would consider. They have a load profile. But if you enhance it to where you can add renewables at the same location, you have that stability that where it's modeled like the generation is there at all times. It actually enhances to add renewables at that location.
So wait, that last statement where it says, but if something or other, I didn't quite follow that language. And whose testimony is this?
Well, I have to go back and
it's in the transcript.
The questioning was from Mr. Santos, and the answering of the witness answering was
William Grant.
Yeah, I'd have to scroll. It's on page 135. So yeah, it's Mr.
What date was it? Was it proceedings of February 15th?
February 15th, yes. And then
wait, 15?
Yeah. Okay. And then the other place, Mr. Marks questioned, does this mean that SPS could have 1,050 megawatts of gas generation at Harrington online, plus another 340 megawatts of solar at the same time? Yes, is the answer. But let me explain. That's called a net zero concept. We have interconnection rights with the Harrington units equal to their capabilities today. As long as we don't exceed that generation, we can complement that generation with renewables, as long as we never exceed the cap on our interconnection agreement. We can complement the generation there with renewables.
Okay, and that, so are we, tell me that page again, is that our,
that is page 68 of February 15th.
So the
That's the footnote 95 that you were mentioning. And I
I
just
appreciate that.
to
What
let you
page again? Page 60?
Page
68.
8.
6-8. And so essentially, are they saying putting in the transmission needed for all three right now is going to enable renewables later because of the presence of the transmission? Is that what's implied there?
My interpretation of it, but I'm not a technical person, but it sounds like they can, when they stop the gas, they can replace it with renewables at the same location. Is that the way you understand that, Robert?
Yes, it is. My understanding was more generally that there's no that having all three units running actually allows renewables and integration over time of renewables. We're talking about 20 years here. So that's my understanding of the testimony. Yeah, and I'm looking at those pages as I speak. And that was brought out in the cross-examination by Mr. Marks on behalf of Sierra Club.
He's talking about the fact that they'll be getting, the witness is saying, we have interconnection rights with the Harrington units equal to their capabilities today. So whatever the megawatts that those three units demand, in terms of capacity, interconnection rights is pertaining to capacity, then that's what's available for the future if you switch out resources. So as long as we don't exceed that generation, that amount of megawatts, we can complement that generation with renewables. I'm not sure we know what that means. As long as we never exceed the cap on our interconnection agreement, we can complement. In other words, they're saying we can, I don't know what he means by complement, but if he means close one of the gas plants and put in an equivalent amount of renewables, that's the only way I can make sense of that. And the question then is, what is that cap? And he says, the interconnection agreement contemplates, I believe, it depends on what you're talking about. Well, it's clear as mud. If you're talking about Harrington 1, it's 340 megawatts. Okay, so that's one plant's worth at Harrington 1. What is it for the three units in the aggregate? 1,050 or 1,055 comes to mind. So it says, so you can't have all three units running on gas at full output, and then also have solar at the same time. He says, no, it's one or the other, but I can have a combination of the assets under the interconnection agreement. So
if you could continue on, Commissioner.
This next sentence is interesting. He says, I think it's important to put on record that you can only do that when the anchor unit is still in operation. So that must be one of them, one of the gas units, and I don't know which one that is. Well, okay, the interconnection agreement apparently puts a cap on the amount of generation. So I think what this is just, I think that all this is saying is you can change out some of the gas for renewables in the future.
Yeah, and they could change coal as well. Continuing on at line 23 on page 69, this is the same cross-examination. The witness says, what I mean by more flexibility, number one, is converting to gas units are traditionally a little bit more flexible as far as their operating parameters than coal unit would be because of the size of the coal handling equipment and all the other issues. So the question is whether to convert the third of three units also to gas rather than coal for the next 20 years during the transition to renewables. And he testifies about, he uses the word flexibility. In other words, it's not an impediment, it's actually the contrary. It allows flexibility in the integration over time of renewables.
Yeah. Yeah, they can ramp up faster. They have great ramps, great ramp rates, he says, as you mentioned, but they also have good turn downs. We know that. cycle and come off. Yes, I mean, certainly operationally, they're better than coal. But I just think that sentence we were looking at previously that said that this enhances would seem to imply that it would enhance the adoption of renewables is kind of a red herring. I mean, it's doable, but that's doable anywhere, anyhow. If you want, yeah.
There was redirect concerning the cross-examination, and I'm looking, as was cited, page 35 on line 20, and the redirect is, now, does keeping all 3 units online preclude at all the adding of renewables to the system at Harrington or otherwise at a later date? Answer, it does not. As a matter of fact, I think it actually enhances the ability, because you do a study and you replace something, you replace it in the models that SPP would consider. They have a load profile and it continues on. But the important words is having all 3 units, he testifies, enhances the ability to add renewables.
So what page is it? What page did you say that was?
I'm sorry, I'm on page 135 of the transcript on the first day, and that's at line 20. And this is the redirect. I believe it's the redirect. Yeah.
Page 135. That's the PDF page. PDF page 135.
Transcript page 135.
Oh, transcript page.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I'm on off here. Okay, and line 20.
Line 20. That's the question.
Now,
and
it's keeping all 3 units on.
Exactly on point. And well, I can read the record again. So like I said, the question is 3 units or 2 units. And the question is, now, does keeping all 3 units online preclude at all the adding of renewables to the system at Harrington or otherwise at a later date? Answer, it does not. As a matter of fact, I think it actually enhances the ability. And then he continues on.
Well, that's interesting. Well, I can see why they wanted to redirect that witness, because the first statements he made suggested there was a cap in capacity, and that was it. You would have to take out some gas to put in some renewables. This controverts that. So he says when you do a study and you replace something, you replace it in the models that SPP would consider. They have a load profile. But if you can enhance it to where you can add renewables at the same location, enhance it. I'm not sure what they mean, except to add transmission. You have that stability that where it's modeled like the generation is there at all times. Well, do you understand the last part of that sentence? Do you understand what they're saying? Because I don't understand it.
Commissioner Hall?
Yeah.
If I might, maybe I can.
Commissioner Fishman, go ahead.
Maybe I can clarify a little bit. I think you're raising a very valid point, is that if there's a transmission constraint when there's peak, they're going to have all of their gas going and it will use up all of the transmission constraint. So having solar on site doesn't sound like would add anything, or having renewables on site doesn't sound like it would add anything to system capacity. So I think you're pointing out a legitimate flaw in that testimony. But on the other hand, it would make it possible to put renewables elsewhere in the system. And I think, as I'm interpreting it, it would be valid to say that it would add to the system capability potentially to add renewables, but certainly not the local Harrington capability to add renewables, is how I'm interpreting it.
I hear what you're saying, but I think, are you talking about adding transmission that would, and that's what would enhance the system?
No. They could just put the renewables at a totally different location where transmission may or may not already be in place. But if they were to try to put renewables at Harrington, they would have to add more transmission. capacity, and that would be part of the cost.
Yeah, that would, well, if it were at a different location, but they're saying at the same location. It says,
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
it says, but if you can enhance it to where you can add renewables at the same location. It doesn't explain how you would enhance it to do that. He says you have that stability, that
Yep.
where it's modeled like the generation is there at all times. It's just not a clear sentence, so I'm not sure what they're getting at. He said, and then he goes on to say it actually enhances to add renewables at that location. So he seems to be fixed on that location. But I understand what you're saying.
And I agree that might be an inaccurate statement is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that it wouldn't add flexibility on a system level as opposed to the location level.
Yeah. I don't disagree with you there, but I mean, at this point, we're sort of straying from what the testimony is. And I don't know that this testimony, well, it just doesn't look all that clear to me what the witness is trying to say, but he seemed to be saying on redirect something that was different from what he said on direct. And whatever. You know, I guess you take the second state, you have to go. I don't know if you have to go along with the redirect as opposed to the direct. So I don't know. I'm still not convinced that the statement about enhancement, at least with respect to the location, is such that continuing to use all three plants is actually going to make it more, is going to enhance the ability to use renewables at that location. It's not clear to me from this redirect that that's true. But I'll let it go. I mean, for now, at least we've seen the testimony, and I appreciate that, Judy. Judy, do you have any kind of understanding you could add to this language?
Not to, everything that the discussion that's gone on here is consistent with the way I see it too. I mean, there's conflicting statements. Nevertheless, I think the point that SPS is attempting to make is that the two are not mutually exclusive. Natural gas and renewable energy. You can do them at the same time. And during this transition period, while Harrington is still in operation and they're moving towards 80% renewables by 2045, they need the natural gas, but they can start to phase it out and add renewables. That's the general gist of what they're saying, as I understand it. So that the two, that this will facilitate the transition process. And this is just one part of it, that it's not, we are going to be just keeping the gas and not working towards the 80% renewables by 2045. They are. And when I go through their exceptions, they talk further about why keeping Harrington online is consistent with the Energy Transition Act and the target of 80% renewables by 2045.
Yeah, I don't disagree with anything you said. I think what this says is, and I think it's consistent with what you just said too. It's just they can replace out some of the gas as time goes by. I don't think they're talking about adding further beyond the cap at that transmission cap, transmission driven, capacity cap.
Commissioner Fishman, did you have something to add?
Yeah, one more follow-up question, actually, for Robert.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I didn't indisposed and I didn't catch up on this file as well as I usually do. But was there any testimony as to how flexible the plants when they're converted to gas might be versus coal? Because I generally think of coal as you turn it on and you keep it running. It's not something you can turn on and off without incurring heavy costs. And that oftentimes gas can be a lot more flexible about when you have it running and when you don't. Was there any testimony about that in this particular case?
Thank you, Commissioner Fishman. Another good question. There was testimony in my recollection about ramping up. The words, well, how long would it take them to get the peaker ramped up? I don't remember the exact testimony, but I remember there was testimony about the ramp up speed to run the third unit, and it was in the testimony. If you ask me for a site right this second, I don't know.
No, that's okay. Just the fact they're using the word peaker tells me they feel like they can turn it on and off. And that's not something you usually get from a coal plant. And so it seems to me part of the underlying reason for doing this is you can get a lot more flexibility out of that system, as well as the cost impacts. You can get a lot more flexibility out of Harrington than you might have now operating it on coal. So that might have been, that to me could be a strong reason to say yes to this. That maybe wasn't explicitly stated.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. Lennon? All right, hearing none. Judy, do you want to just summarize your recommended order?
Yes, Commissioner Maestas, the proposed order would adopt the recommended decision in its entirety. And the only thing I want to touch on that we haven't really, everyone knows that Sierra Club did file exceptions. And originally they objected to the whole project because SPS never sought actual project proposals to replace Harrington. That being said, at this time of the filing exceptions, they are not objecting to the entire application. They believe that the two options before the commission are: one, to approve a CCN for conversion of all 3 units, or 2, to approve a CCN only for the conversion of the 2 newer units and deny the CCN for unit 1. And we've already gone through why they think that that's the most cost-effective alternative. And they spend a lot of time in their decision talking about modeling and why they believe that it's most cost-effective. SPS on Friday filed a response to Sierra Club's exceptions. They believe that, as you've already heard, full conversion is in the public interest and fulfills the standards for granting the CCN and is the most cost-effective alternative. And they believe that the record demonstrates that SPS needs the continuing capacity. Because the coal fire units have been providing 1050 megawatts of reasonably priced, reliable power to New Mexico customers since the mid-1970s. They've already exceeded their original useful life, which was extended in previous cases. They have to cease operating on December 31st, 2024. That is due to an agreed upon order between SPS and the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, which the SPS entered into, and states that they have to close it due to national ambient air quality standards emissions by December 31st, 2024. SPS will continue to need capacity and voltage provided by the coal units way after the coal operations cease on December 31st, 2024. SPS points out that no one disputes that without conversion, SPS would somehow have to enhance its capacity and add new firm and dispatchable replacement resources to such as gas combustion turbines to support intermittent resources that they've been putting in under the ETA. And they mention again that their system would have serious reliability risks without replacing the coal-fired units with some firm capacity. And they also mentioned that they would be forced below the SPP's minimum reserve margin of 12%. And that replacement resources could be cost prohibitive. So that's why they believe that a full conversion is more efficient than partial conversion to allow the facility to serve as a bridge until new technologies and renewable resources can meet the generation and voltage provided by Harrington. In addition, their second response is that conversion is consistent with the ETA's zero carbon by 2045. The Harrington units are still scheduled to end their operational lives between 2036 and 2040, which is 5 years before the 2045 zero carbon requirement of the ETA. They maintain that this will give SPS flexibility in order to gradually implement additional renewable resources such as wind and solar and energy storage as they're developed, but they'll still have this firm capacity in the interim. And I think we've pretty much gone through the rest of it. And if you have any other questions, please call me, not call me, ask me right now. Staff agrees with SPS and has recommended approval of the RD and has not filed any exceptions.
Okay, so we have a potential order, and I think Judy, you did make some amendments to it, but nothing material.
Yes, what I amended was the addition of SPS's response to exceptions because they hadn't been they only came in on Friday afternoon. The basic order adopting the RD in its entirety has not changed.
So, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Hall.
I just want to ask Judy one more question. So the concept that they need all three to provide better stability for future renewables rather than having two, is that the gist of this argument? And if so, what's wrong with using two and not three? It's just not as much capacity there.
It's better for reliability because if there's extreme weather events, they would need to use the third unit. So, and the cost, as Robert Lennon stated, is
close, yes,
is statistically insignificant. So, to have that additional 340 megawatts of generation of the third unit would be very useful in times of severe weather events.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Fishman.
Judy, would it be possible as part of this order to add a bench request for more information on the excess capacity and how much there is, or at least the excess capacity for within the SPS system? basically say yes to your order, keep it as is, and just add that information request for future purposes.
Well, we can, the docket, this order would close the docket, but we could keep the docket open until they file the report. And maybe we could just include it in the order. What report would you like them to file exactly?
Basically to show us the excess capacity on their system, basically loads and resources table, with and without Harrington 3. And an explanation of where there is excess capacity, large excess capacity, where it's being used, how it's being used. Are they selling it? Are the plants sitting idle? Is it getting utilized in their RTO by other utilities? So just so I can gain a little understanding of that apparent discrepancy between their loads and resources table and this 12%. Of course, Harrington is so big that if you closed it, it would eat up all their excess capacity right away. And that might be the answer, but we should just have a little clarity on it.
I thought unit 1 was the unit being contested or being questioned.
Oh, is it unit 1? Okay.
Unit 1 is the third unit and it's 340 megawatts.
Okay, unit 1. So, my thought is if other commissioners are amenable, I would say yes to this order, and just add that little information requirement so we have clarity going forward. And also so they're, when they're filing their upcoming rate case, we have a clear sense of how to assign costs between customer classes. And that information would be helpful as people enter that rate case for them to debate and, come up with a good resolution.
And Judy, do we need to explicitly state in the amendment of your proposed order version 2 that the record will remain open until responses are received?
Yes, I'll add that. I'll say that the docket will close upon the filing of an updated loads and resources table showing excess capacity with and without the Harrington unit 1, and how the excess is used, whether it sits idle or whether it's sold on the market.
Okay, so commissioners, we have version 2 of the order with some amendments suggested by Commissioner Fishman. Are there any objections to the amendment? If so, do I hear a motion to approve the order as amended?
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Hall. Do I hear a second? Second by Commissioner Fishman. Any discussion on the motion? Judy, roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Hall.
Aye.
Commissioner Vicente Aguilar.
Aye.
Commissioner Byrd.
Aye.
Commissioner Fishman.
Aye.
Commissioner Maestas.
Aye.
The order passes 5-0.
Okay, thank you, Bob Lennon, for
Thank
that. Yes, Commissioner Fishman.
Just one final comment, it's kind of a thank you to SPS for finding such a cost-effective way to think about this. And they've already brought a lot of renewables onto their system recently. And just let them know that their efforts and their thinking are appreciated.
Yeah, thank you for that, Commissioner
Mr. Chair,
Fishman.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Just to
Commissioner Hall.
mention, just a remark on Commissioner Fishman's statement. That agreed, they could do, I agree with you that that's a good thing that they do, but the plants were designed to be able to use both resources. So I think it's just good business practice to maximize your use of your facilities.
And if I may, one
Yes,
final
Commissioner.
comment to the Sierra Club, I know exactly where they're coming from, is you could add a lot of gas resources and then not use the flexibility to put in more renewables. And I've seen other utilities do that. And so I understand where the Sierra Club's coming from, but we as a commission just have to be sure that we keep SPS honest in that regard. And I'm fairly certain they will be, actually. So I understand the Sierra Club's arguments, and we're not just dismissing them out of hand, but I think this is the right balance.
Thank you,
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Hall.
So, and I think this brings up an interesting phenomenon that we don't think about too often, which is how are things, for example, the reliability that we want to see on the utilities system, as opposed to what the utility can't ignore in being part of an RTO and requirements that are imposed by the RTO in terms of reliability, and how those two can sometimes be different, and we have to be able to be flexible in our own decisions sometimes in order to make sure that the utilities under our jurisdiction are satisfying requirements in both places to the extent we can go along with it. I think that's what was happening here.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Hall. Time check, we are at about 11:30. We've been at it for a couple of hours, and I'd like to call for a break. Also, as many of you may know, we have Mr. Mark Fenton with PNM and Adam Alvarez. And then from the PRC, we have Jack Sidler and Eli LaSalle. All of us four, we toured the Four Corners Power Plant yesterday in the afternoon. And we have plans to tour San Juan Generating Station immediately after this meeting. So having a lunch break is probably not going to work. So if we could try and get through the remainder of the agenda. I think our plant tour was scheduled for 1 p.m., but I think PNM is flexible in doing that. So however much time we need, but I'm just urging commissioners to be as succinct and concise as possible so we can finish the agenda within a reasonable period of time. So is there any objection to taking a 10-minute break? 10-minute break? Okay, so it's 11:31. Let's just come back. Let's make it 9 minutes. Let's come back at 11:40.
Thanks, Robert. We didn't get a chance to say thank
you, Robert. Yes.
Yes,
thank you very much. Appreciate
it. All right, we'll see you in a bit. All right, everyone, it's 11:40. If we can all reconvene. All right, let's go ahead and proceed. Our next item on the agenda is case 20-212-UT in the matter of the Public Service Company of New Mexico's petition for a declaratory order regarding whether the Efficient Use of Energy Act permits a utility to implement a full revenue decoupling mechanism in the matter of the petition of Albuquerque-Bernalillo County Water Authority and Bernalillo County for a declaratory order regarding whether the Efficient Use of Energy Act mandates the commission to fully authorize full decoupling upon petition by a public utility. We have a potential order regarding the recommended decision. Russell Fisk, are you going to kick this off?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, commissioners, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so last week, Anthony Medeiros presented his RD, his recommended decision, which would advise the commission or recommend to the commission that the commission find as a matter of declaratory relief, declaratory order, declare that the statute, the Efficient Use of Energy Act, as amended, particularly with regard to 6217.5 F2, which was a newly added section in 2019, I believe, that it does not require or mandate full revenue decoupling upon petition of a public utility. That was Anthony's conclusion. As I noted, there are many other issues issues of statutory interpretation regarding the amendments to the Efficient Use of Energy Act that are dealt with in the RD, but there were only two that were the subject of exceptions, and of course, full decoupling is the big issue. So whether full revenue decoupling is mandated by F2 is the big issue. And as I gave a preview last week, the commission already has both orders, my proposed order and my proposed alternative order. I disagree with Anthony with regard to my anticipation of how the New Mexico Supreme Court would interpret the amendments to the EUEA, the Efficient Use of Energy Act, specifically with regard to F2. F2 gives a fairly clear instruction to the commission that upon petition of a public utility, that the commission shall adopt a rate adjustment mechanism that it doesn't use the word decoupling, but that allows the utility to recover its revenue, its approved revenue in the most recent rate case without regard to actual sales. So that's a paraphrasing of what's in there, but and the reason I disagree with Anthony is that a court will take essentially every reasonable assumption, every reasonable inference in favor of upholding statutory language when that statutory language is comprehensible. And I think that the instruction to the commission in F2 is quite comprehensible. In fact, as you'll notice in the memo, my revised memo, in one of the highlighted sections, I note that P&M has pointed to the PRC's own, or the commission's own language in the FIR. This was the Legislative Council Services FIR, but incorporated large sections of the commission's FIR for this particular, for the, I think it was House Bill 248, I want to say, that in 2019 that amended the EUEA in this way. Staff's comments in the significant issue section of the FIR indicated that staff clearly understood it to call for decoupling. They didn't say full revenue decoupling, but they said decoupling. And just give a note. I'm just looking at the memo now on page 5. I can share the screen if I don't know if we usually share screen on the memo. I think we usually share screen on the order. But I just want to, I'll just quickly summarize. In the FIR, our commission staff said this bill has potentially significant implications, both on utility spending on energy efficiency and load management programs that are reflected on customers' bills, and on fundamental rate-making principles that have long been within the discretion of the commission. And it actually does use the word decouples, but doesn't say full decoupling. So what I'm saying there is that it's hard to argue that the language of F2 is not clear and unambiguous when our own staff clearly understood it the way that I understand it today. As I said, Anthony pointed out a lot of inconsistencies between F2 and other portions, pre-existing portions of the Efficient Use of Energy Act, specifically noting that the efficient use of the F2, this option under F2 for a particular type of petition by public utilities, cut out the commission's traditional rate-making tests or rate-making procedures, such as balancing the interests of ratepayers, investors, and the public in setting rates. That's something that's specifically provided for in the alternative section F1 and not provided for in F2. And as I said, staff actually noted, staff understood it to deviate from fundamental rate making principles. So in that case, in that instance, of both, I'd say staff, Anthony, and I all agree that the language indicates that. Now, Anthony found it ambiguous because there's a reference to the removal of regulatory disincentives, and full decoupling would go beyond the removal of regulatory disincentives because the EUAA is, as Anthony correctly pointed out, focused on energy efficiency and load management programs, which do in and of themselves have certain disincentives to the utility because they tend to lower demand for or lower sales, lower demand for energy. That's the whole point. But just because that this decoupling mechanism would go beyond accomplishing those things doesn't at all mean that it's inconsistent with the Efficient Use of Energy Act. As I noted at the end of the open meeting last week, any court or agency, such as the commission, reading a statute, especially an amendment to a statute, is to find, if possible, if reasonable, if there's a reasonable interpretation of the statute that can harmonize the new portion, the amendment, with the existing portions. If you can find one, that's the one you adopt. Again, as I said, assumptions are made in favor of upholding statutory language. And I think here you can uphold that language and follow that instruction, that clear instruction from the legislature by saying, and I think a court would say this, well, yes, it does. Full revenue decoupling goes beyond removing regulatory disincentives. But so what? It does remove those regulatory disincentives. It achieves those goals. So that's enough. If it's over inclusive, that's not it's not fatal. Again, when you harmonize the amendment with the old portions of the agreement, you make assumptions in favor of it. And here, some people even say that it's impossible to ensure that all regulatory disincentives are removed unless you do full decoupling, because you don't really know which portion is due to of a decrease in sales is due to energy efficiency programs or due to something else, even if you know there are other factors. So it's perfectly reconcilable in that sense with the existing portions of the statute. And with regard to cutting out the balancing of interest, that the commission traditionally does. Let me just go, I'm going to get to my memo here and just describe. It's perfectly reasonable for the legislature to do so, to provide an option that does so. You could read the statute to say in F2 that the legislature has already determined that that F2's full revenue decoupling mechanism is effective to remove regulatory disincentives, and that the commission doesn't need to do any balancing. Now, the commission, what P&M in their exception says that the commission should presume that the legislature did this balancing. That's a possibility, but or the commission could assume the legislature didn't do the balancing. But it's clear that the legislature did not delegate that authority to the commission. And I think that actually F1 and F2 stand in stark contrast. And I think that actually supports this interpretation of F2. Because as I note in the proposed order, F2 unambiguously mandates full revenue decoupling. The commission has no discretion under F2 to apply any version of partial revenue decoupling in an attempt to refine the rate adjustment mechanism. The language of F2 indicates that the legislature has determined that full revenue decoupling is an effective method of removing regulatory disincentives. And then the proposed order also includes language contrasting F1 with F2. I'm just basically reading that language now. The inclusion of an express requirement for the commission to balance consumers' interests, investors' interests, and the public interest under F1, and the omission of any such express requirement in F2 indicates an intent by the legislature to exclude any interest balancing from F2. It is reasonable to include such a requirement in F1 and reasonable to exclude such a requirement from F2. That's because F1 is a broad delegation of authority to the commission to identify and to remove regulatory disincentives or barriers to public utility expenditures on energy efficiency and load management measures, and to determine in what manner to do so. It's reasonable that the legislature also invests the commission there in F1 with broad discretion to balance the interests of all stakeholders. F2, on the other hand, provides a specific method by which to remove regulatory disincentives that has been pre-approved by the legislature. Whether the commission presumes that the legislature did the balancing itself or not doesn't matter, and it's clear that the legislature didn't delegate the authority to the commission to do so. So F2 is a departure from the rest of the EUEA, and I would also agree with Anthony that in a sense it's a departure from the Public Utility Act. And I think, there's a lot there to accept by implication, because the statute, the amendments don't say expressly, don't sort of raise red flags that say, this is how we're departing from the Public Utility Act. This is what we're cutting out, but it doesn't have to. In order to make that clear instruction to the commission in F2 viable, or in order to give life to it, in order to effectuate it, a court will say, those are the implications, and it's perfectly fine that these things are implied. It is a departure from the rest of the EUEA, and that's perfectly fine. Amendments are expected to be a departure. So that's how I believe that the court will construe F2. And so as to mandate full revenue decoupling. Now I can go on now to the alternative proposed order, or I can take questions on this interpretation if commissioners would like to ask some questions about it.
Any questions for Russell? All right, hearing none, proceed with, I'm sorry, Commissioner Fishman, did you have a question? You're on mute, sir.
Yeah, you got me again. You love it too, don't you?
I do.
Yeah. At any rate, I was just going to recommend we hear the other order before we do full discussion.
Oh, okay. So you want Russell to cover the other order, or?
Yeah,
you
cover the
moving?
other order and then go into discussion.
Okay, all right. Proceed, Russell.
Okay, so the alternative proposed order that I provided would fully adopt Anthony's recommended decision. And it would basically say the opposite of what I just said with regard to F2. It would say that the commission is persuaded by the hearing examiner's reasoning and accepts the recommendation to issue a declaration that F2 does not mandate the commission to authorize or to approve a full revenue decoupling rate mechanism. It would state that the full revenue decoupling rate mechanism would have effects that far exceed the stated purpose of F2, which is to remove regulatory disincentives. As the hearing examiner has shown, the term regulatory disincentives, as used throughout the Efficient Use of Energy Act and consistent with the stated purposes of the Efficient Use of Energy Act, or EUEA, refers to regulatory disincentives to utility development of cost-effective energy efficiency and load management measures. The full revenue decoupling mechanism advocated by PNM and the other advocates of full decoupling would, as PNM admits, have effects extending well beyond removing such disincentives. Indeed, the adoption of full revenue decoupling would be a radical departure from the regulatory paradigm established in the PUA, eliminating ordinary business risks to which public utilities are subject. Full revenue decoupling would create an entitlement to a fixed revenue, I'll pop up here, in the amount of the revenue requirement established in the utility's most recent base rate case. Such an entitlement payment would be guaranteed by the ratepayers, who would be required to make up any shortfall in revenue from sales, no matter the cause for such a shortfall. As the hearing examiners pointed out, the proponents of full decoupling advocate for an interpretation that would eliminate the commission's authority to balance the interests of ratepayers, investors, and the public, which is central to the determination of just and reasonable rates. Instead, the proponents argue in the exceptions that the commission should presume that the legislature has already undertaken such balancing prior to adopting F2. The commission does not accept that broad presumption, which would be an excessive interpretive leap based on unwarranted implications from the amendments to the EUEA. If the legislature wished to depart so radically from the decades-old approach of the PUA, Public Utility Act, the legislature would have expressly stated so, not only in amendments to the EUEA, but in amendments to the PUA itself. Moreover, the commission will not simply presume that the legislature undertook a balancing of interests that led to the mandatory, upon petition, adoption of full revenue decoupling, a result that is heavily skewed against ratepayers' interests in favor of investors' interests. Says obviously the opposite. And again, I think this is a true statement of the effect of this of the statute and the magnitude of what's implied and not expressly stated, which, Anthony said he wouldn't take that much by implication. And I think that's the best argument the commission could make against, against applying for revenue decoupling, is that it's simply too much to imply. But I believe that the court, any court really, would have no problem in implying all that in order to give effect to the clear instruction that's in F2, in the amended F2. So with that, one thing I wanted to note is that I just discussed how full revenue decoupling is a result that's heavily skewed against ratepayers' interests in favor of investors' interests, because the utility is entitled to, when there's a sales shortfall, is entitled to an adjustment to rates. It may just be some rate classes, or maybe all, to bring the revenue collected up to the revenue requirement established in the most recent rate case. Upon reviewing the petition that PNM filed, before filing this petition for declaratory relief, there was a petition filed by PNM for the actual implementation of such a rate mechanism. And it was first stayed and then dismissed in favor of deciding these questions on declaratory relief. But in that docket, which I believe is 20-00212 UT, PNM actually had proposed a rate adjustment mechanism that would have that would be, as they said, symmetrical in the sense that PNM stated that to the extent that in any year they over recovered their fixed costs through rates, they would have an adjustment downward in favor of investors' interests. Now, again, that petition has been dismissed for the purposes of this declaratory relief action, but it may not, if PNM comes up back with something similar, it won't be so heavily skewed against ratepayers' interest because it will be somewhat symmetrical. I don't know. I don't know if I have an understanding of exactly how symmetrical that really will be, but there's some symmetricality, if that's a word. So with that, I will take any questions.
Any Commissioner Fishman?
Yeah, this is a procedural question. In terms of the type of docket this is this something that can be appealed at the Supreme Court?
Yes, Commissioner Fishman, yes. Declaratory relief is simply a type of relief. It's not, it's a type of relief in a live case. There has to be, the Commission's own rule adopts what both the federal courts and I believe the New Mexico courts have decided with regard to declaratory relief. Declaratory relief is a type of relief, and it has to be in an appropriate case. It's not, it's usually distinguished from what's called an advisory opinion, which is, courts generally don't give advisory opinions, which means if they don't have an actual case or controversy before them in which declaratory relief will provide clarity to the parties and is actually necessary as a relief or called for in some way, they won't simply, a court won't simply opine in the abstract on in a matter of, say, for example, statutory interpretation. So this is a live controversy, especially because PNM actually had a petition that would have been an adjudicated petition for this relief and dismissed it or the Commission dismissed it, but PNM agreed to dismiss that for the purpose of this declaratory relief action. So I have very little doubt that the court would say this is an actual case of controversy. It's ripe for determination, and would take it up on appeal if whichever side wanted to appeal, depending on the outcome today.
Mm-hmm. So you'd mentioned that there's a presumption, or at least PNM is arguing that there is a presumption that in recommending this, that the legislature had already, that the legislature has done the job of balancing the interests of the various parties. Am I hearing that correctly?
Yes, that's an argument made by PNM. I don't necessarily agree that it matters one way or the other, that the Commission has to presume that or could presume simply that the legislature decided to cut that out of the process altogether. But PNM did argue that.
So my question is does the legislature have the power to eliminate that balancing from the process, given that we've got federal Supreme Court decisions that very clearly state something very different?
Commissioner Fishman, that's a good question. What PNM cites, and I'm not sure it was PNM or the other bodies that filed exceptions in favor of full revenue decoupling, is a very, very recent case to which the Commission was a party. It's Citizens for Fair Rates and the Environment versus the NMPRC. This was concerning, I believe, San Juan, the San Juan generating and the ETA, the Energy Transition Act that came down in January of this year, in which there was a challenge by New Energy Economy, a constitutional challenge. There were a number of constitutional challenges, but one of them was that the legislature, by arguably deciding that a certain dollar amount of stranded costs for San Juan were recoverable, had done essentially an implied prudence review for the prudence of the costs incurred, and cut out the commission from its traditional authority to do so. This is obviously a different function that the commission serves, the prudence determination, but prudence of costs, but it's similar to the balancing of interests in that it's definitely a traditional and core function of the commission in rate making. In that case, the Supreme Court actually rejected the argument that the legislature had invaded the constitutional area of authority of the commission, and said that the legislature, the commission is a creature of the Constitution, but also a creature of statute in terms of its particular authority. And they said the legislature can always take those things back and execute and do the work itself. In fact, they cite a case where that says if there's any reason that a particular order, this isn't a different case, will be overturned, it will not be because the legislature decided to take back authority and do the work itself. So what I'm saying, Commissioner Fishman, is that there was an implication that the legislature had. Now, apparently that issue is still to be decided, because that's an issue of interpreting the language of the ETA as to whether the legislature actually decided to undertake that. Because it's just as here, there's no express indication that the legislature has done so. But I think it's a pretty strong case in terms of saying the legislature always has the power to do what the commission does, because the commission gains its authority from the.
I get that, Russell, but
I'm sorry.
But let me do that. Yeah, you got your point across. But to me, it seems that this is a very different situation in that in the case that you're pointing out, they had a very specific number that they came up for a very specific situation. And the legislature did take the power of making that judgment. And okay, I get that. But in this case, what we're presuming is that the legislature has now said, here's an issue that you cannot look at. And they've said it generally, not in terms of a specific case that they're evaluating. And in this case, you can point to the fact that it could lead very directly to very different risk-reward characteristics from at a utility that has decoupling versus a utility that does not. And to me, that's a very different situation. Can you comment on that, about why you think that might not be a very different situation?
Well, Commissioner Fishman, you have convinced me somewhat. Those are very good points, because you're correct. The ETA was dealing with a specific situation and actually provided specific numbers. So it's more reasonable to imply there that the commission actually undertook, or that the legislature undertook some sort of review to decide this number, or that it should be implied, because they came up with a number for a specific case. You're absolutely right. This is a more general application. It could apply to all public utilities. And so I think that is a potentially distinguishing point. I'm
not going to get into excruciating detail on this, but I'll just say that at this point, I'm leaning towards Anthony's decision, simply because his decision says, okay, our courts in New Mexico have basically adopted Hope and Bluefield. Can
you speak up, Steve? Your voice is dropping a little.
Oh, okay. I'm not quite. Yeah. Is this better?
Yes.
Okay. So it seems to me Anthony's arguing that the New Mexico Supreme Court in prior decisions has accepted Hope and Bluefield through their decisions about balancing interests and the need to balance interests. And essentially what this statute seems to say is, no, you're not allowed to balance interests in this one area. And it says it as a blanket. And it says that the legislature is not reviewing each of these cases as they come up. So in forbidding us from balancing interests, they're not picking up the slack. They're just basically saying, oh, no one's allowed to balance interests on this issue. And to me, that's just wrong. And it's a fatal flaw in the legislation, quite frankly. And I would say that if there was decoupling and the legislature would mandate yes to this decoupling, but still allowed us to balance interests, I'd be fine. But that's not what's going on here. And so I think Anthony has kind of captured that in a much more detailed way than I just kind of gave the overview. But to me, that's what's kind of driving me on this one. And with that, I'll shut up and let other commissioners ask questions.
Other commissioners, you have two orders. One, partially adopting the RD, which is what Russell is recommending. And then there's another alternative order fully adopting the recommended decision. Commissioner Hall.
Well, I think Steve kind of captured it. And there's some language in the RD on page 48, if you could put that up too. If someone could put that up on the screen. That I think describes what Anthony was getting at.
Isaac, are you able to do that, or do you want me to do that?
I can do that. It'll just take me 1 sec to pull it up.
Page 48 of the RD.
Isaac, Mr. Chair, this is Anthony. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
I actually had, because I actually had the RD open to page 48, ironically, for whatever reason. So I could, if I could put it on screen, if that would be the commission's pleasure.
Sure, go ahead.
And actually, it sort of starts on, really, the discussion starts on the bottom of page 47.
Okay.
Hold on, Commissioner Hall, let him share his screen first.
Sure.
And so, can you see it now?
Yes, and can you maximize that, or is that as big as?
I can make it a little bit bigger. Is that better?
Yes. Thank you.
And Mr. Chair, Commissioner Hall, where would you like me to scroll now?
Yeah, I just want to read this sentence. Unlike at the bottom of 47, so hold still. Unlike the interpretation of regulatory disincentives, the second interpretive problem reveals a genuine ambiguity in the language of section F2 that requires rejection of literal language approach to statutory construction. Now, here's what we get past the legalese. The problem is that the proponent's position that the decoupling language irrefutably inserted in section F2, go ahead now, without regard to the quantity of electricity or natural gas actually sold by the public utility, it commands the commission to authorize utility requests for rate adjustment mechanisms that accomplish full revenue decoupling flatly contradicts the balancing requirement firmly entrenched in the EUEA and the corresponding bedrock principle inherent in the PUA that to set just and reasonable rates, the commission has to balance the public interest and consumers' interest and investment interest. In other words, without expressly saying anything on the subject in the EUEA or the PUA and promulgating a single isolated subsection of the EUEA that includes generic decoupling language, the legislature supposedly stripped the commission of its authority to perform the balancing test essential to setting just and reasonable rates. And I think that's the crux of the argument. And I think Ashley's interpretation to limit the application of our being stripped of our balancing authority has to pertain only to the EUEA provisions, because it's an absurd result otherwise. And you simply cannot change, you cannot eviscerate our balancing authority that is established in the Public Utility Act and the Constitution by a little phrase that doesn't even utter those words. You can't, it doesn't happen. So I guess what I'm saying is, there's some sort of, Russell is pointing out, well, we did write an FIR that recognizes that this might be a consequence. I think that's kind of a bootstrap argument. You can't conclude from what staff wrote in an FIR that the legislature, all the people who voted for this provision, really understood that at all, whatever was in the FIR, that interpretation. I'm sure they did not absorb everything that was implied there. We all know how the legislature works. Sometimes they read the FIRs and sometimes they don't, and they often don't understand completely what they're passing. And I'm not willing to accept that as fact when the consequence of this language that is adopted in this provision in section F2 is so sweeping. And I think the better interpretation is the one that's given in the RD, which is that, if this is an interpretation, it's limited to the requests that were made under section F2 by the utility having to do with strictly speaking, the energy efficiency programs. So my thinking is definitely aligned along with Commissioner Fishman's, and he put it a lot more in plain language than I just did. But, it amounts to the same thing, which is since it would be such a contradiction in terms for this language to override our far more fundamental obligation to balance consumer and public and investor interests, that you simply cannot interpret this section F2 as having the sweeping effect that Russell is saying it does. It simply doesn't make sense in terms of what we know from the PUA and from the Constitution that we have to do in all cases. So that's my position. So I would go with what's called the alternative order, which I think should be the initial proposed order, which is that conforms with the advice in the RDA in the recommended decision. And that's all I have to say.
Vice Chair Hall, so are you advocating for the order fully adopting the RD or partially adopting the RD? I missed that.
Fully adopting the RD. Thank you for that clarification.
Okay, so do you want to put that in the form of a motion?
Yes, I would like to move. Okay.
Commissioner Vicente Aguilar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The petition that we are speaking of, I think it's the full revenue decoupling mechanism. I think it disrupts the overall regulatory process. And from what I understand, this is the attractiveness of revenue decoupling by the utility companies, and it makes the utility company whole, regardless of the source of earnings or revenue loss. That's the way I understand it. And it also makes the utility companies strong financial position. So we are clearly not in the area of regulating and balancing the application. I also understand that the regulatory policies we need to refocus the utility management on our core responsibility and for the long-term investment. That is our job. We need to learn from the utility companies about their long-term investments. So I also support the alternative order, which is the hearing examiner's reasoning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Vicente Aguilar. All right, we have a motion on the floor. Was there a second to adopt the alternative order, fully adopting the recommended decision?
Second.
Okay, we have a second by Commissioner Fishman. Any further discussion on the motion? Okay, hearing none. Roll call vote. Judy?
Yes, I needed to unmute myself. Commissioner Maestas,
Aye.
Commissioner Hall,
Aye.
Commissioner Byrd,
Aye.
Commissioner Vicente Aguilar,
Aye.
Commissioner Fishman.
Aye.
The motion to accept the alternative order passes 5-0.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Anthony, for being available to assist us with this. Let's go ahead and move on to the next agenda item. This is in the case of 21-112-UT in the matter of the commission's adoption of rules pursuant to the Community Solar Act. Russell Fisk, take it away.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, commissioners. This comes before the commission as
I can do that.
Okay.
All right. Love
you
you.
need to mute
We love you too, Judy.
So Russell, after that
Yes.
last tough one for you, there's Judy just walking all over you when you get to your next one.
Exactly. I feel quite
would-
beaten down. I just to comment on the other case. I agree with Anthony. It's a close issue of statutory interpretation, and it was just as easy for me to write the alternative order as it was to write the initially proposed order, which is usually a sign that there are strong arguments because it simply flowed just like the other one. Anyhow, returning to the community solar rulemaking. The commission's order adopting rule was issued, was actually filed. The written order was filed on March 31st. So we're in the period, which is noted in the order adopting rule itself, of considering motions for reconsideration or rehearing. I would apply the Public Utility Act's Section 62-1016's 30-day deadline for filing such motions because the Public Utility Act is obviously closely related to the Community Solar Act. So this motion was not filed as a motion for reconsideration, but instead a request for clarification of the rule itself. In the past, I have advised the commission to treat requests for clarification of a rule as motions for reconsideration so that there's a procedural there's a procedural schedule provided for. And also in case the commission decides that it would like to actually amend a rule or revise a rule to provide the clarification. The clarification that Yellowbird Solar requests is to clarify that quote unquote aggregated solar facilities will be eligible for consideration as community solar facilities to participate in the statewide community solar program administered by the commission. Yellowbird Solar notes that it will be undertaking prior to the selection process, the RFP process that the administrator of the program will undertake using the selection criteria that are in the rule to select projects to go forward. The Yellowbird Services notes that it would prefer not to find out at the time of that it submits its bid that it doesn't qualify because it's submitting a bid for an aggregated facility. So because it will have already undertaken efforts to recruit subscribers, and they like to know upfront if such facilities, aggregated solar facilities, will be eligible to participate. Now,
Mr. Chair, Russell, I have a question. I wonder if I misheard you. Did you say they wanted to take advantage of the IRP process? Is that what you said?
No, RFP process.
RFP, okay.
Yeah, the process for selection.
Yes.
It's an RFP-like process, really, for selection of projects according to the detailed selection criteria and scoring amounts that are in the rule itself.
Yeah, that makes sense.
There's nothing in the rule that specifically excludes aggregated solar facilities, and I'll describe what those are in a moment. It is a question that could use clarification. Aggregated solar facilities involve, as opposed to a typical community solar facility, typical community solar facility would involve a developer or subscriber organization, as they're called in the rule and in the act itself, the building a facility, building a set of photovoltaic solar panels or something like that. I'm not the technological expert here, but there would be one facility to which many people can subscribe in the area, and they become the subscribers to this particular facility. And it's one newly built facility. Aggregated solar facilities include, they may not be limited to, but they include existing distributed generation, existing rooftop solar panels, for instance. In other words, people who are already receiving the benefit of having solar panels on their home, and maybe they have net metering, et cetera, would be sort of repackaged into the aggregate solar facility. Now, there may also be new generation. In fact, as Art O'Donnell pointed out, when we discuss this as a team, there's likely to be some new generation, because it's very unlikely that people who have existing distributed generation or rooftop solar panels will qualify as low income. As everybody knows, the rooftop panels tend to be fairly expensive, and the idea of community solar is to allow for renters and low income people to participate in solar when they can afford rooftop solar. So the aggregated solar facilities might include some new generation, but they would certainly include some existing rooftop solar that's already, it would have to be sort of reconfigured, I guess.
Russell?
Now, go ahead. I'm sorry.
And this is
Commissioner
something
Fishman.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had a number of months ago had Yellowbird, who, full disclosure, who I'd worked with on various energy issues, their owners, even prior to when I came to the commission. But when they talked to me, a number of months back, they'd said, I'd asked the question, gee, there's no way I'd say yes to your proposal if you're just going to repackage and repackage existing solar facilities. And their comment back to me is, no, they wouldn't do that. They would only be all new facilities that they would include. And that may not be clear in their filing here. Just to point out to you, I would never give them a decision that would say yes to repackaging existing solar. If they were to do this kind of a aggregation, it would have to be all new solar installations. So just a comment there.
Well, Commissioner Fishman and commissioners, I would advise the commission not to. I mean, it's a interesting. It's perfectly fine, Commissioner Fishman, that you revealed that. The commission shouldn't rely upon such a statement. It is not clear in Yellowbird Solar's motion. I think that the consideration should be limited to the motion. Certainly. When we discuss this with among our team members, of course, our consultant Art O'Donnell is our most knowledgeable person at the commission, probably about community solar, and he expected that it would include current rooftop solar being repackaged, and so did the utilities that opposed the request for clarification, EPE and PNM. So there's a little bit of ambiguity there. The commission, could request, I was going to say the commission could request a clarification from Yellowbird. This is a request for clarification in and of itself. Perhaps then, well, let me get to my proposed order. And
Sure.
What I might conclude is that my proposed order might not apply to Yellowbird Solar's situation, should the commission adopt it. Because perhaps Yellowbird Solar is not including that existing generation. As I noted in my memo, I'll do this quickly. The team, the Community Solar Action Team, did meet about this issue, or some members did, and we didn't really reach a recommendation. This is one of the only orders that you've had in this matter where there was no recommendation. But as I read the responses by EP and PNM, particularly EPEs, I began to think that aggregated solar facilities that include existing generation would be contrary to the purposes of the act. Now, just as you said, Commissioner Fishman, you wouldn't want ones that included that. So this proposed or clarifying order might not really clarify Yellowbird's own situation, because the proposed order, just like EPE's response and PNM's response, assumes that there will be existing generation that is included, and the primary motivation of my proposed order that would the finding that it would be contrary to the act is that, including people who already have solar facilities is contrary to the meaning of the act, of the purpose of the act, even though there's not a section of express stated purposes in the act. I think it's quite reasonable to assume, as EPE does, that the primary purpose of the Community Solar Act is to provide access to the environmental and economic benefits of self-generated solar to people who otherwise don't have access. So including people who already have access would be contrary to that. My proposed order would say that it's not clear that the legislature intended to prohibit aggregated solar facilities, but it is clear that such facilities are not contemplated under the act. The proposed order would state that the commission understands the act to be somewhat flexible and adaptable. And so even if aggregated facilities were not contemplated, The commission does not automatically conclude that they're prohibited. However, I was persuaded by EPE's arguments that converting an existing interconnected solar facility into a part of a community solar facility does nothing to promote the objectives of the act. The proposed order would state, I'm sorry, go ahead, Commissioner Frischman.
So I was just going to ask Russell, it's so fundamental. I'm just wondering whether, we should just bump any vote on this to after we get clarification from Yellowbird about what they're really asking for. And I could be off the wall. Maybe they are asking at this point, just because I had that conversation 4 months ago. But I would totally agree that if they're asking to be able to aggregate existing solar, no, that's not the purpose of this act. It's to get more solar out there. If they're going to aggregate, it has to be all new solar. And that if they want clarification, we could do that without asking the question and just decide today, we could say, yes, but it all has to be new solar. And I don't want to discourage people from coming up with novel ideas, because we can always say no to them. But someone may come up with something really ingenious. And, so here's someone trying to come up with something new. Might be a long shot, probably is. But, it might be more fair just to ask them for a clarification and then proceed with the vote. Waiting a week or two, I don't think will make much difference. I don't know how the other commissioners feel about that.
Or maybe if I may, in the alternative, Russell, in your order, you didn't recommend revisiting the final rule through a motion to reconsider and explicitly indicate that aggregated solar facilities are not eligible. I just, if we're going to make any kind of amendments in response to these motions, I think we should do them as soon as we can, as soon as procedurally we can do that. So would that maybe clear this up as opposed to going back to Yellowbird and asking for a clarification?
Mr. Chairman, what I would say is this. This request for clarification didn't request any, wasn't actually a motion for reconsideration in the sense that it did not ask for any additional or any changed rule language. And the proposed order would not actually adopt, or I'm not recommending any changes to the rule language. For one thing, this is apparently going to be an unusual situation. Yellowbird said that during discussions in the rulemaking itself, workshops and such, this was an unusual and possibly by other participants disfavored sort of option. But the rule, this order would just provide clarification in the order itself. And that's because not only because this is an unusual situation that I don't think the rule needs to deal with directly, needs to actually expressly address, but also because this is based upon interpretation of the purposes of the act itself. So what I'm saying is to the extent that it includes that an aggregated solar facility would include existing solar, I don't think it would be within the commission's discretion as to choose as a policy matter to allow such aggregated solar facilities, because it seems clearly contrary to the purpose of the act. And so it doesn't need to be a rule change, and I'm not advocating one, and that's not what was asked for by Yellowbird. So I think this order would provide the clarity, this order alone would provide the clarity the Yellowbird needs, except that Yellowbird may not actually be including such existing facilities. I would advise that because this we're treating it as a motion for reconsideration, and we have treated such requests for clarification as motions for reconsideration in the past, that today is actually the 20-day deadline for the commission to act upon such a motion. And since we're treating it that way, I would prefer to simply add to the order that this finding or this decision does not apply to aggregated solar facilities that are made up of entirely new generation that's been established for the purpose of the community solar facility and doesn't include any pre-existing. I think that actually would probably suffice for Yellowbird. Because if that's really what they plan to do, then great. That would not be contrary to the act. It's hard for me to see much of a difference between an aggregated solar facility and an ordinary community solar facility, because an ordinary community solar facility still I assume has separate parts. This is how unfamiliar with the technology, but they would certainly have separate panels. So I don't know if it would even be very different if it's all new. It seemed like it'd be quite similar to an ordinary community solar facility. So I could just provide that clarification, additional clarification in the proposed order. Commissioner Fishman, with that.
I would support that. I'm not sure anybody else would, but we can take a quick vote on that, or Commissioner Mastis could move the order as is, or move an order that says we prohibit new aggregation as well. So, all those are on the table.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Vice Chair Hall.
So I apologize. I got bumped off of my internet, so I didn't quite catch all the discussion, and I didn't hear Commissioner Fishman's proposal. I wonder if he could just summarize that again for me.
Well, actually, Russell made a proposal. So Russell, you get to repeat it.
So Commissioner Hall, this proposed order that would respond to Yellowbird Services request and clarify that aggregated solar facilities are against the purposes of the act, and so the commission will not allow them to be part of the program. It may be assuming that this aggregated solar facilities proposed by Yellowbird include pre-existing, rooftop solar, et cetera. In other words, that they sort of repackaging at least part of their solar into a new community solar facility, which is what I understood it to be. What in our discussions, I think Art O'Donnell assumed that it would include existing solar, and that EPE and P&M in the responses assume that too. And really, all of the arguments made by EP and P&M really are about the fact that including pre-existing solar would be contrary, and that's what my proposed order would adopt too. Now, Commissioner Fishman stated that he's had communication from Yellowbird Solar, I think prior to this ever being filed, that its aggregated solar facilities would not include any existing rooftop solar or anything like that. Would not be repackaging. It would be all new. And so, I suggested that the proposed order include, after this long discussion of aggregated solar facilities that assumes that they include existing facilities, that it would just include a note that says this finding does not apply to aggregated solar facilities that are entirely made up of new facilities that are purpose-built for the community solar facility. I think that makes perfect sense. In fact, I really don't think the commission could deny a facility like that unless there was, unless the parts were far flung or just didn't work out for interconnection wise. But if it's all new, if it's all for a community solar facility, if it's purpose built to serve the purpose of the act, then it seems that clarification could be provided. And if that's what Yellowbird Solar actually intends to do, then they have their clarification, excuse me.
Clarification specifically
Yes.
about, what would be the clarification again?
The clarification would be to say, the proposed order already says aggregated solar facilities that include existing generation, such as rooftop solar, and that sort of repackage it, are not eligible for participation in the program.
In the aggregation program?
in the community solar program, the statewide, because the act actually refers to a statewide community solar program. And so this would say, the proposed order says that. But since Yellowbird may actually be proposing, it's not clear, aggregated solar facilities that are entirely new, where every part is purpose built and is not already a distributed generation rooftop solar facility that's already operating, that'd be perfectly fine, because it's the problem with the aggregated solar facility, as EP and PNM argued, and as I would agree, is that if you include existing rooftop solar, you're including people who already have access to the benefits of solar, the economic and environmental benefits of self-generated solar, and the Community Solar Act is intended to reach out to people who don't have access. So does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Well, so anyway, I would move the order with that amendment.
All right, we have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Fishman. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a second by Vice Chair Hall. Any discussion on the motion? Judy, roll call vote, please.
Yes, Commissioner Maestas,
Aye.
Commissioner Hall,
Aye.
Commissioner Vicente Aguilar,
Aye.
Commissioner Fishman,
Aye.
Commissioner Byrd.
Aye.
The order passes 5-0.
Just a comment.
Yes, Commissioner Fishman.
Yeah, real quickly is, so I'd worked with the Yellowbird owners on local issues. I never had a financial involvement or investment with them. So I just wanted to explain why I did not recuse myself in this particular vote.
No objection to me, from me anyhow.
Duly noted. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let's move on to the next agenda item. It's in the case of 18-383-UT in the matter of the filing of advice notice number 69 by Socorro
Yes.
Electric Cooperative.
Commissioner Maestas, at this point in time, I'm going to request that we table this matter to next week, because I think it will take a lot of time to talk about. And late yesterday afternoon, we received a second or third notice of appeal filed by Socorro Electric and an emergency writ of mandamus. I don't believe that either one of those would affect the potential order, but the discussion might be extensive, and I don't see a time urgency at this point. So given the fact that you mentioned you wanted to go on the tour, and I really don't think that it would be wise for the commission to rush this matter, I recommend tabling it to next week.
So moved.
I agree. All right, do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor by Vice Chair Hall to table and a second by Commissioner Fishman. A roll call vote, Judy.
Commissioner Byrd,
Aye.
Commissioner Vicente Aguilar,
Aye.
Commissioner Maestas,
Aye.
Commissioner Fishman,
Aye.
Commissioner Hall.
Aye.
Yes, the motion to table this matter till next week passes 5-0.
All right, thank you, everyone. We are going to excuse ourselves. We're going to be leaving here very shortly to tour the San Juan Generating Station. But I did want to take this opportunity to thank Jeffrey Jenkins with Arizona Public Service. He's the plant manager of Four Corners. He had organized the tour for us yesterday with his staff. It was very informative. And I wish you all were here, but we're going to go ahead and excuse ourselves. I'm going to turn the meeting over to Vice Chair Hall. So enjoy the rest of the meeting.
Bye. Have a wonderful afternoon.
You bet. See you all later.
I'm afraid to go back on mute again, not having Joe to remind me when I hit it.
See ya.
Bye.
But you don't mute.
That's
Okay.
why.
So let's proceed with discussion and potential action. Item number 11, HR policy 13. This guy's, I guess, going to be presented by Wayne Probst. Mr. Probst, are you available?
I am, Madam Chair and members of the commission. And if we want to table this one till next week as well, that's fine. I don't think there's a great urgency. We are updating our media policy for the first time since 2004. So, but I'm also happy to proceed as the commission wishes.
Well, commissioners, what's your pleasure? We could do that. That would, I've missed the first half of the first day of the conference I'm at to attend this meeting, and I would like to be able to attend it. I think it goes until 12:30, so I could maybe catch the last part of whatever panel is going on now.
I'm okay with delaying this as well.
Is that okay?
Madam Vice Chair, I'm okay too. I'd prefer to have the chairman as part of this discussion.
Yes, I agree. All right, so let's table item number 11, and I think we can get through our communications pretty well.
Could we have a motion?
vote.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do I have a motion?
So
You guys wanna-
moved.
Second.
Okay. Judy, can
I'll
you
take
take
the roll. Commissioner Fishman,
Aye.
Commissioner Hall,
Aye.
Commissioner Vicente Aguilar,
Aye.
Commissioner Byrd.
Aye.
The motion to table this consideration of press policy revisions and resolution is tabled until next week. Passes 4-0.
Great. Thank you, Judy. So moving on to communications with Chief of Staff. Do we have some communications to hear from you, Mr. Probst?
Just one, Madam Chair, and I will be brief. I wanted to bring to the commission's attention, actually, Commissioner Hall, this is an initiative of hers, has been in touch with Public Utilities Fortnight, which I'm sure you all have heard of. And they are interested in doing a feature story, a day in the life of the New Mexico Public Regulation Commission, which I think is a wonderful opportunity to highlight the work that the commission has been doing. So I just wanted to let all commissioners know that we'll be reaching out to you to try to schedule that at a time that's convenient for the commission. I'm thinking maybe a Wednesday when the commission meets, we can invite them to come to Santa Fe, meet with the commissioners, observe the meeting, but we're open to any suggestions on how to do this in such a way that we take a full advantage of this opportunity, because I do really think it's again a great way to highlight the work that the commission has been doing over the last couple of years, actually. So with that, Madam Chair, I don't really have anything else, and again, we'll reach out to the commission and try to get that scheduled as soon as possible.
Thank you, Wayne. You know, one thing I would add to that is that in the conversation I had with Steve Mitnick when he was at the Santa Fe Current Issues Conference a couple of weeks ago, and we discussed this, was that he said he envisioned taking a full day to interview people. He wanted to interview commissioners, but also, you know, staff at some point. And I'm not sure I can't recall the conversation clearly enough, but in my mind, I was thinking advisory staff. I don't know, or whatever is appropriate. I know they have, I recall reading articles in the past where they had also interviewed some staff members of other commissions. So, but what I'm concerned about is that if we have an open meeting, it might not provide them adequate time to do the depth of interviewing they want to do. So okay. I would advise looking at a day, another day, but yeah. So
we'll do that. Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, So looking ahead to item number 12, communications with general counsel. Are there any comments from general counsel? Any communications?
Commissioners, I don't have any communications right now, and no one else has conveyed any to me.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, communications with commissioners?
I'm good.
Okay, hearing none, I think our next agenda item is adjournment. Unless there's any objection, we are adjourned.
Well done,
All
Vice
right,
Chair.
thank you, guys.
Thank you.